The stagecoach rattled through Devil's Canyon as gunfire erupted from the rocks above. Ethan Cade, a man who'd buried his heart with his family years ago, gripped the reins with hands that hadn't trembled in a decade. But when the woman beside him stood up mid-ambush, pistol raised, eyes burning with fearless fire, something inside his dead chest cracked open. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was supposed to die alone, unmoved, unfeeling. Yet here she was, Eliza Hart, forcing him to remember what it meant to be alive. Want to see how a broken man finds redemption in the most dangerous place on earth? Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The Ghost Driver. The sun hadn't yet burned through the morning haze when Ethan Cade checked the harness straps for the third time. His fingers moved with mechanical precision, test the leather, check the buckles, run a hand along each horse's flank to feel for heat or swelling. 23 years driving coaches through territories that swallowed men whole had taught him that survival lived in the details. Santa Fe's staging depot smelled of manure, coffee, and desperation. Passengers huddled near the ticket window, their faces tight with the particular anxiety of people about to trust their lives to fate and a man they'd never met. Ethan ignored them. He always did. "Stage leaves in 10, called Buchanan, the depot manager, a wheezing man whose gut preceded him into every room. "Got a light load today, 4 passengers, mail pouch, and 1 freight crate." Ethan grunted acknowledgement. Words were currency he spent sparingly. "You hear about the Silverton run?" Buchanan continued, lowering his voice. "Comanche hit them 2 days out. Took everything, left the driver nailed to a cottonwood tree." "I heard. Don't that bother you none?" Ethan's pale eyes, the color of winter ice, fixed on Buchanan with the warmth of a gravestone. "Man's dead regardless of how I feel about it." Buchanan shifted uncomfortably. After 3 years of working with Ethan Cade, he still couldn't quite get used to the coldness that radiated from the man like frost off a corpse. "Right. Well, passengers are waiting." The first aboard was a portly merchant named Hawkins, sweating through his vest despite the cool morning. He struggled with an oversized carpetbag until Ethan wordlessly took it and secured it to the roof with practiced efficiency. "Much obliged," Hawkins puffed. "Say, you're Ethan Cade, aren't you? Heard you once drove through a Comanche war party without losing a single passenger." "Got lucky. Luck or skill, I'll take it." Hawkins wedged himself into the coach, claiming the forward-facing seat with the territorial aggression of a man used to getting his way. Next came a young couple, newlyweds by the look of them, still soft with hope that the frontier hadn't yet beaten out. The man helped his wife aboard with excessive care, as if she might shatter. Ethan remembered feeling that way once, a lifetime ago. The memory was a blade he'd learned not to touch. "How long to Colorado Springs?" the young husband asked. 4 days if the weather holds, 6 if it doesn't." Ethan's voice carried no inflection, no reassurance, just facts. "And if we run into trouble? Then it takes as long as it takes." The young man paled but nodded, climbing aboard without further questions. Ethan was securing the last of the luggage when he heard her voice. "Is there room for one more?" He turned. The woman stood at the bottom of the coach steps, a single leather traveling bag at her feet. She wore a dark green riding dress, practical rather than fashionable, and her auburn hair was pulled back in a simple braid. But it was her eyes that stopped him, clear, direct, and utterly unafraid. "Manifest says 4 passengers," Ethan said. "Manifest's wrong." She produced a ticket from her sleeve and held it up. "Eliza Hart, purchased yesterday evening. Perhaps your Mr. Buchanan forgot to update his paperwork." Ethan studied her for a long moment. Most women who traveled this route did so out of necessity, fleeing something or desperately seeking something. They carried their fear like luggage. This one carried nothing but certainty. "Inside," he said finally, taking her bag. As she passed him to board, he caught the faint scent of sage and leather. No perfume, no powder. A woman who understood where she was going. "Ma'am?" the young husband said, standing awkwardly in the cramped space. "You can take my seat. I don't mind facing backward." "I've ridden backward before," Eliza replied, settling herself next to Hawkins without ceremony. "I'll survive." Ethan closed the door, checked the latch twice, then climbed to his perch. The shotgun guard, a kid named Riley who talked too much and aimed too poorly, was already in position, cradling a Winchester that had seen better days. "We ready?" Riley asked. Ethan released the brake, gathered the reins, and spoke to the horses in a language of subtle pressure and voice tone. The 6-horse team leaned into their harnesses, and the overland mail coach rolled forward into a country that killed the careless and unlucky with equal enthusiasm. The first hours passed in the familiar rhythm of road and wheel. Santa Fe fell away behind them, replaced by rolling hills of pinon and juniper. The sky stretched endless and blue, beautiful in the way that dangerous things often were. Ethan kept the horses at a steady pace, fast enough to make time, slow enough to preserve their strength. He'd learned long ago that the frontier respected patience more than speed. Inside the coach, the passengers settled into the awkward silence of strangers forced into intimacy. Through the small window behind his seat, Ethan could hear fragments of conversation. Hawkins dominated, as men like him always did, expounding on business opportunities in Colorado. The young couple listened politely. Eliza Hart said nothing. By noon, they'd covered 15 miles. Ethan pulled the team to a halt near a creek he'd used 100 times before. The horses needed water and rest. The passengers needed to stretch legs cramped by the coach's confines. 30 minutes, he announced, setting the brake. Stay in sight of the coach. The passengers tumbled out with varying degrees of grace. Hawkins immediately sought shade and produced a flask. The young couple walked hand in hand toward the creek, lost in their private world. Riley wandered off to relieve himself behind a cluster of rocks. Eliza Hart approached the horses. "You rotate them," she observed, watching as Ethan adjusted the team positions. "The 2 leads from this morning are now in the middle." "Weight distribution changes as the day goes on," Ethan replied, surprised she'd noticed. "Horse that leads in the morning might not have the stamina for afternoon." "My father bred horses in Virginia, before the war." She ran a hand along the neck of the nearest bay, her touch confident and knowing. "These are good animals, well cared for. They keep me alive." "Is that why you do it? Stay alive?" The question landed like a punch. Ethan's hand stilled on the harness he'd been adjusting. Most people asked him about the danger, the Indians, the pay. Nobody asked him why. "Somebody's got to drive," he said finally. "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got." Eliza studied him with those clear eyes, and Ethan had the uncomfortable sensation of being truly seen for the first time in years. Then she smiled, not the practiced smile of social necessity, but something genuine and knowing. "Fair enough," she said, and walked back toward the creek. Ethan watched her go, feeling something stir in the tomb of his chest, something that felt dangerously like curiosity. They made another 15 miles before sundown forced them to stop. The terrain had grown rougher, the road climbing into foothills scattered with ponderosa pine. Ethan chose a clearing he'd used before, defensible, with good sight lines and a spring-fed pool for the horses. Building camp was a choreographed routine. Riley gathered wood while Ethan tended the team. The passengers helped or hindered according to their natures. Hawkins supervised from a seated position. The young couple tried to help but mostly got in the way. Eliza Hart gathered kindling with the efficiency of someone who'd done it before. "You've traveled rough country," Ethan observed, arranging stones for a fire ring. "Some. Most ladies would have stayed in Santa Fe, waited for a train. I'm not most ladies. I'm starting to see that." The fire caught, grew, pushed back the darkness that fell like a curtain in these altitudes. Riley produced coffee and hardtack from the supply box. It wasn't a meal so much as fuel, enough to keep bodies functioning through the night. They ate in silence, broken only by the snap of burning wood and the distant yip of coyotes. The young wife shivered, despite the fire's warmth. Her husband put his arm around her, murmuring reassurances that sounded hollow even to him. "Are we safe here?" she asked, her voice small. "Safe as anywhere," Ethan replied. Which wasn't reassuring, but it was true. "I heard the Comanche can slip into camp silent as ghosts, kill everyone before they wake." "They can." "Ethan," Riley said, shooting him a look, "you're scaring the lady." She asked a question. I answered it. Perhaps the truth with a bit less truth, Riley suggested. Eliza spoke up from her position across the fire. "He's right to tell it straight. False comfort is worse than fear. At least fear keeps you alert." The young wife looked stricken. Her husband glared at Eliza, then at Ethan. Not everyone shares your casual attitude toward death, ma'am. It's not casual, Eliza replied, her voice gentle but firm. It's realistic. We're crossing 200 miles of country where the law is whatever you can enforce with a gun. Pretending otherwise doesn't make us safer. It makes us victims. Easy to say when you're not terrified, the young man shot back. Who says I'm not terrified? Eliza met his eyes across the fire. Fear and action aren't opposites. You can be afraid and still do what needs doing. That's called courage. Silence settled over the camp. Ethan found himself watching Eliza with renewed interest. She had the bearing of someone who'd learned these lessons the hard way, through experience that left scars you couldn't see. First watch is mine, he announced, standing. Riley takes second. Everyone else gets sleep while you can. The passengers retreated to the coach, which offered dubious protection, but the psychological comfort of walls. Ethan settled against a boulder at the edge of the firelight, rifle across his knees, and let his senses expand into the darkness. This was when he felt most himself, alone, alert, needed only for his skills rather than his companionship. The night spoke to him in the language of sound and silence, the rustle of wind through pine, the click of cooling rocks, the breathing of horses and humans. He cataloged each noise, noting what belonged and what didn't. An hour passed. 2. The moon rose late, painting the clearing in silver light. You don't sleep much, do you? Ethan's hand was on his pistol before he registered the voice. Eliza stood at the edge of the firelight, wrapped in a blanket. It's my watch, he said. It's been your watch for 3 hours. Riley was supposed to relieve you. Kid needs the rest. So do you. She moved closer, settling onto a log near his boulder. When's the last time you slept a full night? Don't remember. Can or won't. Does it matter? Eliza was quiet for a moment, staring into the dying fire. I suppose not. We all have our ways of surviving. What's yours? She glanced at him, surprised. You asking me a personal question, Mr. Cade? Ethan. And you started it. A small smile touched her lips. Fair. My way of surviving is remembering that nothing lasts forever. Not pain, not fear, not even the bad times. Everything changes, eventually. Some things don't change. Like what? Like the fact that people die. Sometimes for no reason. Sometimes despite everything you do to save them. The words came out harder than he'd intended, carrying weight from a past he'd sworn never to speak of. Eliza didn't flinch. You're right, she said. Death doesn't change. But life does, and we get to choose what we do with the time between. Pretty philosophy for someone traveling through country that doesn't give a damn about philosophy. It's kept me alive this long. How long is that? Long enough to know a haunted man when I see one. Ethan's jaw tightened. You don't know anything about me. I know you drive that coach like you're trying to outrun something. I know you look at people like you're already seeing them dead. And I know that whatever you lost, you blame yourself for it. The words hit like bullets, each one finding its mark. Ethan stood abruptly, his movement sharp with anger he rarely let show. You should get some sleep, Miss Hart. Long day tomorrow. It's Eliza, and I'm sorry. I overstepped. Yeah, you did. She rose, gathering her blanket around her. But before she turned back toward the coach, she paused. For what it's worth, she said quietly, whatever you think you deserve, all this punishment you're inflicting on yourself, I doubt it's earned. Pain isn't penance, Ethan. It's just pain. Then she was gone, leaving him alone with the night and the ghosts that lived in it. Ethan didn't sleep that night. Not because of watch duty, but because Eliza Hart's words had cracked something open inside him, some sealed chamber he'd locked away years ago. And now the memories leaked out like poison from a wound. He remembered fire. He remembered screaming. He remembered arriving home 2 hours too late, finding nothing but ashes and silence where life had been. His wife, his daughter, gone. The official story said it was an accident, a knocked-over lamp, dry wood, bad luck. But Ethan knew the truth. He'd taken the long route home that night, stopped for drinks with another driver, told himself one more hour wouldn't matter. It had mattered. It had cost him everything. Afterward, he'd tried to die. Not dramatically, he wasn't the type for grand gestures. But he'd taken every dangerous run, every route through hostile territory, driving the teams harder and faster than was wise, hoping the frontier would do what he couldn't bring himself to do. It hadn't. Instead, he'd survived. Route after route, ambush after ambush, storm after storm. He survived until survival became its own kind of death, a hollow existence of motion without purpose. Until tonight. Until a strange woman with auburn hair and eyes that saw too much had asked him why. Dawn came cold and gray. Ethan roused the camp with the same lack of ceremony he did everything. Riley, bleary-eyed and guilty about sleeping through his watch, muttered apologies that Ethan ignored. The passengers emerged stiff and sore, complaining about the coach's inadequate cushioning. Eliza said nothing about their midnight conversation. She met his eyes once across the morning fire, a question in her gaze, but she didn't press. Ethan was grateful and troubled. He wasn't used to grateful. They pushed north into country that grew more hostile with each mile. The road deteriorated to little more than parallel ruts through increasingly rough terrain. The coach lurched and swayed, testing the passengers' constitutions and the strength of Ethan's arms as he fought to keep the team steady. By midday, storm clouds gathered to the west, massive, dark, and moving fast. Ethan read them with the grim knowledge of experience. They wouldn't outrun it. Best they could do was find shelter before it hit. "There's a way station about 5 miles ahead," he called down to Riley. "We push for that." 5 miles in this terrain? Riley looked doubtful. "That's 2 hours minimum." "Then we better hurry." Ethan urged the team faster, balancing speed against safety. The horses sensed the coming storm, their ears flicking nervously. Inside the coach, the passengers grew quiet, feeling the urgency even if they didn't understand its source. They made 4 miles before the storm caught them. It hit like a physical blow, wind that rocked the coach on its springs, rain that turned the road to soup within minutes. Visibility dropped to nothing. The horses panicked, fighting the reins, and Ethan had to use every ounce of strength and skill to keep them from bolting. "We need to stop," Riley shouted over the wind. "Can't. Road's washing out." It was true. Ethan could feel the wheels sliding, the ground beneath them turning unstable. Stop now, and they'd be mired, possibly tipped. Their only chance was to keep moving, to reach higher ground before the flash flood he knew was coming found them. Lightning split the sky, so close Ethan felt the charge in the air. Thunder followed instantly, a crack that made the horses scream. One of the leads reared, nearly pulling its teammate off balance. Inside the coach, someone was praying. Someone else was crying. Ethan blocked it all out. His entire world narrowed to 6 horses and 100 yards of road he could barely see. Then, Eliza's voice cut through the chaos, clear and calm. "Ethan, boulder ahead, right side." He saw it, a massive rock that must have rolled onto the road during the downpour. He hauled left, felt the wheels on the right side leave the ground for a heart-stopping moment, then slam back down as the coach cleared the obstacle by inches. "Good eye," he shouted back. "There's more. The road's collapsing." She was right. Ahead, he could see the road's edge crumbling, falling away into a gully that was rapidly becoming a river. They had maybe 30 seconds before the whole section went. Ethan made a decision. He whipped the team into a gallop. Dangerous in these conditions, potentially fatal, but their only shot. The coach lurched forward, wheels bouncing over rocks and ruts. 20 yards. 10. The led horses hit the stable section just as the road behind them gave way with a sound like the earth breaking. The middle pair made it. The wheelers strained, the coach teetering on the edge of collapse. Then they were through, climbing onto solid ground as the road they'd just traveled vanished into churning water. Ethan kept them moving for another quarter mile before finally hauling back on the reins. The horses stood trembling, lathered, but alive. The coach had held together, and somehow, impossibly, they'd survived. Riley was shaking. Jesus Christ, Ethan." "Check the passengers," Ethan said, his own hands not quite steady. Riley climbed down and opened the coach door. Hawkins tumbled out, immediately vomiting into the mud. The young couple clung to each other, both pale as death. And Eliza. Eliza stepped down calmly, water streaming from her hair, and looked at Ethan with something like approval. "Hell of a drive," she said. Despite everything, the danger, the fear, the nearness of death, Ethan felt a laugh building in his chest. It came out as a rough bark, rusty from disuse, but it was genuine. "Hell of a spotter," he replied. Their eyes met and held. And in that moment, Ethan felt something shift. The wall he'd built around himself developed its first crack. The way station, when they finally reached it, was little more than a fortified shack with a stable. But it was dry, and the station master, a grizzled man named Polk, who'd seen everything and been impressed by none of it, had coffee and beans. "Heard you comin'," Polk said as they stumbled inside. "Figured you'd either make it or you wouldn't. Glad you did." "Road's out between here and Santa Fe," Ethan told him. "Figured that too. This storm's been building for days. You're stuck here till it clears and the road company can make repairs. Could be a week." "A week?" Hawkins looked horrified. "I have business in Colorado." "Then you'll conduct it late," Polk said with zero sympathy. "This ain't Boston. Nature don't care about your schedule." The passengers spread out in the cramped space, claiming corners and trying to dry out. Ethan saw to the horses first. They'd earned special care. He rubbed them down, checked for injuries, measured out extra grain. They'd saved everyone's lives today. The least he could do was ensure they were comfortable. "You talk to them." Ethan turned. Eliza stood in the stable doorway, still damp, watching him work. "They respond to voice," he said. "It's more than that. You speak to them like they're people you respect." "Respect works both ways. They run for me because I don't ask more than they can give. Wish more people understood that principle." She moved closer, running her hand along a chestnut mare's neck. "Back there, on the road. That was some of the finest driving I've ever seen." "You've seen a lot of driving?" "Some. My husband was a freighter before—" She trailed off, something painful flickering across her face. "Before what?" "Before the war took him, along with pretty much everything else." She said it matter-of-factly, but Ethan heard the weight beneath the words. "He taught me to read terrain, to spot trouble. Said those skills kept him alive more than any gun ever did." He was right. He was. Until the day he wasn't. Eliza's smile was sad. "That's the thing about the frontier. You can do everything right and still lose. So why stay? Why not go back east where it's safer?" "Because safe isn't the same as alive. And I'd rather feel something, even fear, even loss, than feel nothing at all." The words echoed what she'd said the night before, but this time Ethan heard them differently. This time he recognized them as a challenge. "That why you're going to Colorado?" he asked. "I'm going to Colorado because my sister's there. She married a rancher, had 2 children, and writes letters about how happy she is. I want to see if it's true. Want to see if happiness is actually possible out here. Or if we're all just pretending until the frontier takes that too." "And if it's pretend? Then at least I'll know. At least I'll have tried." She looked at him directly. "What about you, Ethan? What are you trying to do out here?" He wanted to deflect, to turn the conversation away from himself. But something about Eliza's honesty demanded equal honesty in return. "I'm trying to die," he said quietly. "Have been for 8 years. But the damn frontier won't take me." "Maybe it's trying to tell you something." "Like what?" "Like maybe you're meant to live instead." Before Ethan could respond, Riley appeared in the doorway. "Polk says we should eat while the food's hot, such as it is." The moment broke. Eliza gave Ethan one last long look, then followed Riley back to the shack. Ethan stayed with the horses, ostensibly checking their hooves, but really just needing space to breathe. She was dangerous, this Eliza Hart. Dangerous because she asked questions he'd spent years avoiding. Dangerous because she looked at his carefully constructed death wish and called it what it was. Not nobility, not penance, but cowardice. The thought stung because it was true. That night, squeezed into Polk's way station with 6 other people and nowhere to escape, Ethan found himself part of the kind of conversation he normally avoided. Hawkins held forth about markets and opportunities, his earlier terror forgotten or repressed. The young couple, Ethan learned their names were Thomas and Sarah, spoke shyly about their plans to start a farm. "Fresh start," Thomas said. "Clean slate. That's what Colorado represents." "Represented the same to a lot of folks," Polk interjected. "Half of them are dead now. Other half wish they were." "You're a cheerful sort," Sarah said. "I'm a truthful sort. There's a difference." Eliza sat near the fire, quiet but attentive. Every so often, Ethan caught her watching him, those clear eyes seeming to see straight through his defenses. He should have found it invasive. Instead, he found it grounding, like being truly seen made him more real, more solid than he'd felt in years. "What about you, Miss Hart?" Hawkins asked. "What takes you to Colorado?" "Family," Eliza replied simply. "You have people waiting?" "A sister, her husband, 2 nieces I've never met." A shadow crossed her face. "It's been too long. Time to remedy that." "Well, you picked a hell of a time to travel," Polk said. "Road's bad, weather's worse, and the Comanche are active all up and down this route." "When's a good time to do difficult things?" Eliza countered. "Never seems to arrive in my experience, so you do them anyway." "Spoken like someone with more courage than sense," Hawkins laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." The conversation drifted to other topics, but Ethan stayed focused on Eliza. Everything about her contradicted itself. She was soft-spoken but fierce, gentle but unafraid, wounded but whole. She fascinated him in a way nothing had for longer than he could remember. It terrified him. Because fascination led to connection. Connection led to caring, and caring led to the kind of loss that broke a man beyond repair. He'd sworn never to go down that road again, but here he was, taking the first steps despite himself. 3 days they spent at Polk's way station, waiting for the storm to pass and the road to become traversable. 3 days that felt both too long and too short. The enforced proximity wore on everyone's nerves. Hawkins grew loud and irritable. Thomas and Sarah bickered in the way of couples who'd run out of patience. Riley drove Polk to distraction with endless questions. But Ethan and Eliza found a rhythm. It started small. She'd help him with the horses, moving with the competence of someone who knew what she was doing. They'd work in comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need filling. Then, gradually, they started talking. Not about anything important at first, just observations, small thoughts, the mental detritus of people spending too much time in close quarters. But bit by bit, the conversations deepened. "You loved them very much," Eliza said on the second day. They were outside, ostensibly checking the road conditions, but really just escaping the way station's cramped confines. Ethan didn't ask how she knew. "Yes." "Want to tell me what happened?" "No." "Want to tell me anyway?" He should have walked away, should have shut down the conversation. Instead, he found himself talking. "Fire. 8 years ago, I was late getting home. By the time I arrived," he stopped, the words catching in his throat. "They burned my wife, my daughter. She was 6. I buried what was left of them in ground so hard I had to use a pickaxe." Eliza's hand found his arm, a gentle pressure. "I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. Doesn't change anything." "No, it doesn't, but carrying it alone doesn't either." "What else am I supposed to do with it?" "Feel it. Let it hurt. Then let it go." Ethan laughed, bitter. "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple. It's actually the hardest thing in the world. But it's better than this half-life you're living, this slow suicide by inches." "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Her voice was soft but iron hard. "I understand what it's like to lose everything, to blame yourself, to think you don't deserve to heal because healing would somehow dishonor what you lost." "It would." "That's horseshit, Ethan." The profanity startled him. Eliza rarely swore. "Your wife, your daughter, they loved you, didn't they?" "Yes." "Then they wouldn't want this. They wouldn't want you punishing yourself forever. They'd want you to live. You can't know that." "Can I?" "Because my husband told me the exact same thing before he died. He made me promise I'd keep living, keep feeling, keep trying, even when it hurt, especially when it hurt." Tears glistened in Eliza's eyes, the first real crack in her composure Ethan had seen. It made her more human, more real. "Did you?" he asked quietly. "Keep your promise?" "I'm trying. Every day I'm trying. Some days are harder than others. But I'm here, aren't I? Still moving forward, still choosing life even when death would be easier." They stood there in the afternoon sun, 2 broken people holding each other's pain. And for the first time since the fire, Ethan felt something other than numbness. He felt understood. On the 4th morning, Polk declared the road passable. The passengers received the news with mixed feelings: relief at escaping the cramped way station, anxiety about what lay ahead. Ethan felt his own complicated emotions. Part of him was glad to get moving, to return to the familiar rhythm of road and horses. But another part, a part he'd thought long dead, regretted leaving this small space where he'd started to feel almost human again. They loaded up in the gray dawn, Polk warning them about washouts and unstable sections. "Take it slow," he advised. "Road's liable to surprise you." "Always does," Ethan replied. Eliza was the last to board. She paused at the step, looking up at Ethan on his perch. "Ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be." "Good," she smiled. "Because I have a feeling the interesting parts are just beginning." She was more right than she knew. The road north tested them immediately. Whole sections had been scoured away by floodwater, forcing wide detours through terrain that had never been meant for coach travel. Ethan's arms ached from the constant strain of holding the team steady over uncertain ground. But he'd driven worse, and the horses trusted him enough to follow even when their instincts screamed danger. They made decent time despite the obstacles, covering 20 miles by evening. Ethan chose a campsite on high ground, wary of more storms. The sky looked clear, but in this country, conditions could change in minutes. That night around the fire, the mood was subdued. The journey's dangers had become real rather than theoretical, and even Hawkins had stopped his endless boasting. People ate quickly and retired to the coach, seeking what rest they could. Ethan took first watch again. He'd stopped pretending Riley would do it. The kid meant well, but fell asleep within an hour of trying. Better to just handle it himself. "You're going to collapse if you don't sleep," Eliza said, appearing beside him like a ghost. "You keep saying that." "You keep not listening. I'll sleep when we reach Colorado." "Will you?" She settled next to him, and Ethan found he didn't mind the company. "Or will you just take another job, another route, another excuse to keep running?" "Maybe. Probably." He paused. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." "Why?" The question hung in the night air. Eliza was quiet for a long moment, staring into the darkness beyond their small circle of firelight. "Because I see myself in you," she said finally. "The person I was 2 years ago. And I remember how close I came to giving up completely. If someone hadn't—" She trailed off, shook her head. "Someone showed me that life was still worth living, even broken, even scared. I want to do the same for you." "I'm not a project, Eliza." "I know. You're a man who's forgotten how to be alive. And I'm a woman who's learned that sometimes helping someone else heal is how you finish healing yourself." Ethan looked at her, really looked. In the firelight, he could see the lines around her eyes, the silver threading through her auburn hair. She'd lived hard, suffered hard, but she was still here, still fighting, still hoping, still alive. "I don't know if I can," he admitted quietly. "Can what?" "Come back. From where I've been? I don't know if there's enough of me left." "There is." She said it with such certainty that Ethan almost believed it. "I've seen you with the horses. I've seen you drive. I've seen the way you protect these passengers even while pretending not to care. You're still in there, Ethan. You've just forgotten how to be him." "What if I don't want to remember? What if it's easier this way?" "Easier isn't better. And you don't strike me as a man who's ever chosen easy." She was right. Even in his grief, even in his death wish, Ethan had always chosen the hard road, the dangerous route, the impossible task. Maybe it was time to choose something just as hard, but infinitely more frightening. Maybe it was time to choose life. "Teach me," he said suddenly. "Teach you what?" "How you do it, how you keep going, how you—" He struggled for the words. "How you survive with your heart intact instead of locked away." Eliza smiled, and in that smile, Ethan saw both pain and promise. One day at a time, one choice at a time. You wake up and decide to feel instead of numbing, to connect instead of isolating, to hope instead of despair. Sounds exhausting. It is, but it's worth it. How do you know? Because right now, in this moment, I'm sitting next to someone I'm starting to care about. And that feeling, that small flutter of connection, that's worth all the exhaustion in the world. Ethan's breath caught. "Eliza, I know. Too fast, too soon, too dangerous." She stood, brushing off her skirt. "But I learned the hard way that life doesn't wait for the perfect moment. So I say what I feel when I feel it. And right now, I feel like you're someone worth knowing. Someone worth... She paused. Someone worth saving. She walked back toward the coach, leaving Ethan alone with the night and thoughts that wouldn't quiet. Someone worth saving. When was the last time anyone had thought him worth anything beyond his skills with a team? When was the last time he'd thought it himself? The answer was 8 years ago. Before the fire, before the loss, before he decided he was better off dead. But Eliza Hart was challenging that decision, challenging everything he'd built his new life around. And the terrifying part was that he wanted to let her. For the first time in 8 years, Ethan Cade wanted to be saved. The question was, did he have the courage to allow it? But the mountains came at them like teeth. 2 days past Polk's way station, the terrain shifted from rolling hills to something meaner. Jagged peaks that scraped the sky, valleys so deep the sun barely touched bottom, and roads that clung to cliff faces with the confidence of a drunk man on a ledge. This was the kind of country that separated the skilled from the lucky, and Ethan had long ago stopped believing in luck. The coach groaned under the strain, every bolt and joint protesting the punishment. Inside, the passengers had gone silent, too frightened or too exhausted to speak. Even Hawkins had stopped his endless commentary, reduced to gripping the seat with white knuckles as the coach swayed over drops that promised no forgiveness. Ethan felt the weight of their fear pressing against his back through the thin coach wall. 5 lives depending on his hands, his judgment, his ability to read terrain he'd only traveled a handful of times before. It should have felt like pressure. Instead, it felt like purpose. That was Eliza's doing. Since their conversation 3 nights ago, something had shifted in him. Not a transformation, nothing so dramatic. More like a door opening in a house he'd thought permanently sealed, air moving through rooms that had been stagnant for years. He didn't know if he liked it yet, but he couldn't deny it was happening. "Stream ahead," Riley called out, pointing to where water cut across the road. "Looks shallow." "Looks are liars," Ethan replied. He pulled the team to a halt and climbed down, his boots hitting ground that felt uncertain, even standing still. The stream wasn't wide, maybe 12 feet across, but water in mountain country was deceptive. A trickle could hide depths that would swallow a horse. A calm surface could mask currents that would rip a coach off its wheels. Ethan grabbed a long branch and waded in, probing the bottom, 2 feet deep at the edges, 3 in the middle, rocky but stable, manageable if he chose his line carefully. "We crossing?" Riley asked from above. "We're crossing." He was climbing back up when Eliza opened the coach door and stepped out, ignoring the protests of the other passengers about letting the cold air in. "Deep?" she asked. 3 feet, middle, rocks look solid. "Current?" "Moderate, nothing we can't handle." She studied the crossing with the same careful attention she gave everything, her eyes tracking the water's flow, reading patterns Ethan hadn't expected her to see. "Angle upstream 20 degrees, she said. "Let the current help push you across rather than fighting it." Ethan blinked. "That's actually right. How'd you know that?" "Told you. My husband freighted. He taught me to read water." A sad smile touched her lips. Said water was honest. It told you exactly what it would do if you knew how to listen. Smart man. He was, until a river smarter than him proved otherwise. The words landed heavy. Ethan understood loss that came from water, from elements that didn't care about skill or preparation. The frontier killed experts and novices with equal indifference. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't be. He died doing what he loved. There are worse ways to go." She met his eyes. "Dying slowly of regret, for instance, that seems considerably worse." The observation stung because it was true. Ethan had been dying of regret for 8 years, each day a small surrender, each breath a betrayal of the man he'd been. "You don't pull punches, do you?" he said. "Life's too short for soft words. I learned that the hard way." Before Ethan could respond, Thomas stuck his head out of the coach. "Are we moving? My wife's feeling poorly." 2 minutes, Ethan said. He turned back to Eliza. "Get inside. This might get rough." "I've handled rough before." "I know, but humor me anyway." She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes and did dangerous things to Ethan's carefully maintained emotional distance. "As you wish, Mr. Cade." She climbed back into the coach. Ethan returned to his perch, gathered the reins, and spoke quietly to the horses. They trusted him. That trust was a responsibility he took more seriously than any other. Easy now. We're going to take this slow and steady. He angled the team exactly as Eliza had suggested, 20 degrees upstream. The lead horses entered the water, ears flicking nervously but feet finding purchase on the rocky bottom. The middle pair followed, then the wheelers pulling the coach into the current. The water hit the wheels with force that made the whole vehicle shudder. Ethan felt it trying to push them sideways, to catch them wrong and flip them. But the angle was right, the current actually helping carry them across at a controlled diagonal. Halfway. 3/4. Then the near wheeler stumbled, its hoof catching between rocks. The horse panicked, thrashing, and the whole team started to lose cohesion. "Steady!" Ethan's voice cut through the chaos, calm and commanding. "Easy, girl. Find your feet." The mare stopped fighting, trusting his voice more than her fear. She pulled free, regained her footing, and the team surged forward onto the far bank. They'd made it. Riley let out a breath he'd been holding. "Jesus, thought we were done for." "The day's young," Ethan replied, but there was no heat in it, just fact. They climbed for the rest of that day, the road switching back and forth up slopes that seemed to deny the possibility of passage. The horses labored, their breathing harsh in the thin air. Ethan rotated them constantly, never asking any animal to pull the hardest position for too long. By the time he found a suitable campsite, the sun was bleeding out against peaks that looked like broken glass. The clearing was small, barely large enough for the coach and a fire, but it was sheltered from wind and had decent sight lines. The passengers emerged from the coach like prisoners released from cells, their faces showing the strain of a day spent being rattled over impossible roads. Sarah looked particularly rough, her skin pale with what Ethan recognized as altitude sickness. "She needs water," Thomas said, supporting his wife, "and rest." "She'll get both," Ethan replied. "Riley, get a fire going. I'll see to the horses." The routine of making camp settled over them. It was work that required no thought, just muscle memory and methodical attention. Ethan found it meditative, unharnessing the team, checking each horse for injuries, measuring out grain, ensuring they had water and picket lines that wouldn't tangle. You loved them. He'd known Eliza was there without turning. He was starting to recognize her presence the way he recognized changes in weather, a subtle shift in the air around him. "They keep me alive," he said, same answer as always. "That's not what I asked." Ethan paused, his hand on the neck of the lead mare, a gray named Smoke who'd been with him for 3 years. "Yeah, I suppose I do." "Why them and not people?" "Horses don't expect anything except consistency. Feed them, water them, treat them fair, and they'll run through hell for you. People—" He trailed off. "People are complicated," Eliza finished. "They want things. They need things. They can hurt you. And you can fail them. You didn't fail your family, Ethan." He turned on her then, something hot and painful rising in his chest. "I was 2 hours late, 2 hours. If I'd just come straight home instead of stopping for drinks with Charlie Brennan, if I just—" "You'd have burned with them," Eliza interrupted, her voice sharp enough to cut through his spiral. "Or you'd have gotten there in time to watch them burn while being unable to save them. Either way, you'd be dead or destroyed. Is that what you think they'd want? Your death as payment for theirs?" "It's what I deserve." "Deserve?" Eliza stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "You want to talk about deserve? My husband deserved to see his children grow up. Your daughter deserved to live past 6. The world is full of people who deserve better than they get. That doesn't mean the survivors deserve to suffer forever." "You don't understand. I understand grief. I understand guilt. I understand lying awake at night cataloging every decision that led to disaster, wondering if different choices would have meant different outcomes." Her voice cracked slightly. "But I also understand that path leads nowhere except deeper into darkness. At some point, you have to choose to step into the light, even if it feels like betrayal, even if it hurts." Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to defend the walls he'd built, the numbness he'd cultivated. But looking at Eliza, at this woman who'd suffered her own losses and somehow remained whole, he couldn't find the words. "I don't know how," he admitted quietly. "Start small. Start with tomorrow. Wake up and choose to feel one thing, just one. Gratitude that you're alive. Appreciation for coffee, joy at sunrise, anything. Then the next day, choose again. And if I fail? Then you fail, and you choose again the day after that. She reached out, her hand finding his arm. You don't heal all at once, Ethan. You heal in pieces, in moments, in tiny victories that add up to something larger. He wanted to believe her. That was the terrifying part. For the first time in 8 years, he wanted to believe that healing was possible. Why do you care? He asked. You don't know me. Not really. I know enough. I know you're a good man pretending to be empty. I know you protect people while telling yourself you don't care. I know you're lonely in a way that has nothing to do with being alone. She paused. And I know that if I don't at least try to reach you, I'll regret it. I've had enough regret for one lifetime. The honesty in her words stripped away Ethan's remaining defenses. He stood there in the fading light, his hand still on the horse's neck, and felt something crack open inside his chest, something that had been frozen for so long he'd forgotten it could thaw. I'm afraid, he said, the admission costing him more than he'd thought possible. Of what? Of feeling again. Of caring. Of... He struggled for words. Of surviving the loss if it happens again. It will happen again. Not the same loss, maybe, but loss finds everyone eventually. That's the price of connection. Eliza's hand tightened on his arm. But connection is also what makes survival worth it. Without it, we're just moving through days. With it, we're living. I've forgotten how to live. Then I'll remind you. The words hung between them, a promise and a challenge. Ethan met her eyes and saw his own fear reflected back, but also hope, fragile and fierce. Okay, he said. Okay? Okay, teach me. Eliza's smile could have lit the darkening sky. Lesson 1 starts now. Come help me with dinner and tell me one thing you're grateful for today. It seemed absurd, reducing healing to such a simple exercise. But maybe that was the point. Maybe healing wasn't supposed to be grand or dramatic. Maybe it was just this. Small choices, small steps, small moments of connection. I'm grateful the horses made it across that stream, Ethan said. Good. Tomorrow, pick something harder. They walked back toward the fire together, and for the first time in longer than Ethan could remember, he didn't feel entirely alone. Dinner was the usual frontier fare. Beans, hardtack, coffee, strong enough to strip paint. But Eliza insisted everyone eat together, creating what she called proper civilization, despite being in the middle of nowhere. My mother always said that eating together makes people human, she explained, distributing tin plates. Animals eat alone. People share meals. Philosophical for beans, Hawkins muttered, but he took his plate without real complaint. Sarah managed a few bites before her stomach rebelled. Thomas fussed over her with the kind of anxious attention that came from love and helplessness in equal measure. How much higher do we climb? He asked Ethan. We're near the summit now. Tomorrow we start descending toward the valley. Lower altitude should help your wife. How long until Colorado Springs? 2 days if we make good time. 3 if we don't. Thomas nodded, his face showing relief tempered by exhaustion. Thank you for getting us this far. The gratitude made Ethan uncomfortable. He'd just been doing his job, following the route, keeping the wheels turning. That's what he told himself. But some quieter part acknowledged the truth. He'd been careful with these passengers, more careful than strictly necessary. He'd protected them not just because it was his duty, but because somewhere along this journey, they'd stop being cargo and become people he didn't want to see hurt. That was Eliza's influence, too. She had a way of making the world feel smaller, more immediate, more human. She drew people out with questions and genuine interest, transforming strangers into something approaching community. Tell us about your sister, Sarah asked Eliza, her voice weak but curious. You mentioned she has children? 2 daughters, Emma and Charlotte. 7 and 5, last I heard. Though that was 6 months ago. They're probably taller now, if children work the way I remember. You haven't seen them in 6 months? Longer. I haven't seen my sister in nearly 3 years. Life kept getting in the way. Then my husband died, and I spent a year just existing. Couldn't seem to move forward or back. Eliza stared into her coffee. Finally woke up one day and realized I was wasting time I didn't have. So I wrote Catherine, told her I was coming, and here I am. Brave, Sarah said. Overdue, Eliza corrected. There's a difference. Still, traveling alone all this way, most women wouldn't. Most women are smarter than me, Eliza smiled, but I've never been accused of an excess of good sense. Laughter rippled around the fire. Genuine laughter, the kind that came from shared experience rather than forced politeness. Ethan found himself relaxing into it, letting the sound wash over him without immediately searching for threats. This was what normal felt like, what human connection felt like. He'd forgotten. What about you, Mr. Cade? Hawkins asked. You have family waiting anywhere? The question landed like a rock in still water. Everyone went quiet, sensing they'd touched something fragile. No, Ethan said simply. Never married? Once, long time ago. The smart thing would have been to leave it there, let the silence build until someone changed the subject. But Eliza was watching him with those knowing eyes, and he'd just promised to try being human again. Lost my wife and daughter 8 years back, he continued, the words coming hard but coming. Fire took them while I was away. Been driving stages ever since. The sympathy that flooded the faces around the fire made Ethan want to retreat, but he held steady. Let them see him. Let himself be seen. I'm sorry, Thomas said quietly. Can't imagine that kind of loss. Hope you never have to. Is that why you drive? Sarah asked. To keep moving? Partly. Mostly because... He paused, searching for truth. Because I didn't know what else to do. Driving made sense when nothing else did. And now? This from Eliza, her voice soft. Ethan met her eyes across the fire. Now I'm starting to wonder if maybe there's more. Or could be. Something passed between them in that moment. An acknowledgement, an understanding, a door opening wider. The other passengers felt it too, a shift in the air that had nothing to do with weather. Riley, oblivious as always, broke the moment. Well, I think driving beats farming any day. All that plowing and planting and hoping the rain comes. No, thank you. Give me a good team and an open road. You say that now, Hawkins chuckled. Wait until you hit 30 and your back starts reminding you of every mile you've rattled over. I'm 23. 30's a lifetime away. That's what I thought at 23. Now I'm 47 and my knees predict weather better than any almanac. The conversation drifted to safer topics. Weather, travel, the mundane details that filled the spaces between significance. Ethan let it wash over him, content to listen rather than contribute. But he remained aware of Eliza, the way she laughed at Hawkins's stories, the kindness with which she asked Sarah about her plans, the ease with which she moved through the world, wounded but not broken, scarred but not destroyed. She was teaching him without teaching, showing him by example that it was possible to carry loss without being crushed by it, to remember the dead while still living for yourself. When the fire burned low and the passengers retreated to the coach, Ethan took his usual position for watch. But this time, when Eliza appeared beside him, he didn't question why. Can't sleep? He asked. Don't want to. Seems a shame to waste the stars. He looked up. She was right. The sky was incredible, a density of stars impossible to see anywhere near civilization. The Milky Way stretched overhead like spilled milk, and shooting stars streaked past with almost ridiculous frequency. Beautiful, Eliza breathed. Yeah. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the cosmic show. After a while, Eliza spoke. You did well tonight. At dinner. I told the truth, that's all. That's everything. Truth is the hardest thing to give. You make it look easy. Trust me, it's not. Every time I talk about my husband, I feel like I'm betraying him by still being alive. But I do it anyway because the alternative is forgetting, and I'm not ready to forget. Will you ever be? I don't think so. I think we carry the people we've loved forever. The trick is learning to carry them without being weighed down. Ethan considered this. Is that possible? I'm still figuring it out, but I think so. I think... She paused, gathering thoughts. I think we honor them by living fully, by not letting their deaths make our lives smaller, by choosing joy when we can find it, even if it feels wrong at first. Does it still feel wrong for you? Sometimes. When I laugh too hard, when I feel happy, when I... She glanced at him. When I start caring about someone new. That feels like betrayal. But I do it anyway. The implication in her words made Ethan's heart stutter. Eliza. I know, too fast, too complicated, too dangerous. But I'm done pretending I don't feel things just because feeling them is inconvenient. She turned to face him fully. I care about you, Ethan Cade. I don't fully understand why, and I definitely don't know where it leads. But I'm tired of living half a life. So I'm telling you the truth. Ethan's carefully constructed walls were crumbling. Everything he'd built to protect himself from feeling was turning to dust under Eliza's relentless honesty. I don't know if I can be what you need, he said. I don't need you to be anything except honest. Can you do that? Could he? Could he risk opening himself up to the possibility of connection, knowing it meant opening himself up to loss? But looking at Eliza, at this brave, broken, beautiful woman who was choosing to live despite everything, Ethan realized the real question wasn't whether he could risk it. It was whether he could risk not trying. Yes, he said. I can be honest. Then tell me one true thing right now. Ethan took a breath. I'm terrified of you. Eliza blinked, surprised. Of me? Of what you make me feel? Of what it would mean to let you in? Of... He struggled for words. Of being alive again after years of being a ghost. Is that what you've been? A ghost? Yeah. Going through motions, hitting marks, existing without living. It was easier that way, safer. And now? Now you've complicated everything. He said it without accusation, just fact. You've made me want things I thought I'd buried. Made me hope when I'd gotten comfortable with hopelessness. Is that bad? I don't know yet. Ask me when we reach Colorado. Eliza smiled. Deal. But until then, try something for me. What? Try being alive. Try feeling. Try letting yourself want tomorrow instead of just enduring it. And if it hurts, then it hurts. But at least you'll be feeling something real. She leaned against his shoulder, a gesture of trust and intimacy that Ethan felt like a brand. He held very still, afraid that moving would break whatever spell had made this moment possible. Above them, stars wheeled across infinite darkness. Below them, the fire crackled and settled. And between them, something fragile and new began to grow. Hope. Terrifying, exhilarating, devastating hope. The next morning came cold and crystalline. Ethan actually woke, having apparently fallen asleep against Eliza's shoulder at some point in the night, to find her already up, rekindling the fire. Morning, she said, smiling. Morning. I fell asleep. You did. First time since we left Santa Fe, I'd wager. Probably. He stood working, feeling back into stiff limbs. Sorry. Don't be. You needed it. The other passengers emerged gradually, complaining about the cold and the discomfort and the general unfairness of frontier travel. Ethan went through his morning routine, checking the horses, inspecting the coach, planning the day's route. But something was different. The tasks felt less mechanical, more purposeful. He caught himself noticing small beauties, the way frost glittered on pine needles, the particular gold of early sunlight, the satisfied sound horses made when eating their grain. Small things. Moments. Exactly what Eliza had told him to look for. You're smiling, Riley observed, looking vaguely disturbed. I've never seen you smile. Maybe I've never had reason to. And now you do? Ethan glanced toward where Eliza was helping Sarah into the coach. Maybe. Riley followed his gaze and grinned. Oh, that makes sense. Nothing makes sense, but I'm done fighting it. Good for you, boss. About damn time. They loaded up and headed out, beginning the long descent toward the valley. The road was treacherous, steep grades that required careful braking, switchbacks that tested Ethan's skill, and drops that would kill everyone if he miscalculated by 6 inches. But he'd driven worse, and more importantly, he had reason to be careful. Not just duty, not just survival, but actual desire to see tomorrow, to reach Colorado, to discover what might happen next. That desire kept him sharp through miles that would have been routine torture before. He drove with precision and care, reading the road, trusting his instincts, protecting his passengers like they mattered. Because they did. Somewhere along this journey, they'd become more than cargo. They'd become people he didn't want to fail, especially Eliza. They made good time, covering 25 miles before stopping for the night. The campsite Ethan chose was near a stream, with good grazing for the horses and shelter from wind. After dinner, after the passengers had settled, Ethan found himself walking the perimeter with Eliza. It had become a ritual, these quiet moments away from others, where honesty came easier. "One more day," Eliza said. "Then Colorado Springs." "Nervous?" "About seeing my sister?" "Terrified. It's been so long. What if we've grown into strangers?" "Then you'll get reacquainted. That's what time together is for." Practical advice from a man who avoids people. "I'm trying to be better about that." "I've noticed." She bumped his shoulder with hers, a gesture of affection that Ethan was learning to accept. "You're doing well." "I haven't done anything." "You're here. You're trying. You're letting yourself feel. That's not nothing, Ethan." He wanted to argue, to minimize, to retreat into old patterns, but he'd promised honesty. "It's harder than I thought it'd be," he admitted, caring again. "It's like learning to walk after years of paralysis. Everything aches. But you're walking." "Yeah, I suppose I am." They reached the stream and stopped, watching water catch starlight and turn it into moving silver. "What happens after Colorado Springs?" Eliza asked quietly. "I take the coach back to Santa Fe. Pick up another run, keep driving." "Is that what you want?" "It's what I know." "That's not what I asked." Ethan turned to face her. "What do you want me to say, Eliza? That I'd give it all up, settle down, build a normal life? I don't know how to do that anymore. Driving's all I've got." "You have more than you think. You're just afraid to claim it." "Maybe. Probably." He paused. "What do you want?" "Honestly, I want you to choose life, real life, not this half-existence. I want you to stop running long enough to build something." She met his eyes. "And selfishly, I want you to build it somewhere near me." The admission hung in the air between them. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. "That's a lot to ask," he said. "I know, but I learned not to wait for perfect moments. They don't exist. There's only now and what we're brave enough to reach for. And if I reach and miss, then at least you tried. At least you lived." She stepped closer. "I'd rather risk failure than guarantee regret. How about you?" Ethan looked at this woman who'd somehow cracked him open, who'd made him feel after years of numbness, who'd shown him that maybe, possibly, healing wasn't just a fantasy. He didn't have answers, didn't have plans, didn't have anything except this moment and the terrifying, exhilarating possibility of more. But maybe that was enough to start with. "I'm not ready to make promises," he said carefully. "I don't know what I am capable of. Don't know if I can be the man you deserve. I'm not asking for perfect. I'm asking for real." "Then here's real. I care about you more than I've cared about anyone in 8 years. That terrifies me. But it also makes me want to see what comes next. So I'm not making promises, but I'm not running away either." "That's enough," Eliza said. "That's more than enough." She reached for his hand. Ethan let her take it, marveling at how something so simple, fingers intertwined, could feel like revolution. They stood there as the stream whispered past and the night deepened around them. Two broken people learning to be whole. Two ghosts remembering how to be human. The frontier was still dangerous. Tomorrow would still bring uncertainty. And nothing was guaranteed except that loss would find them eventually. But for now, in this moment, they were alive. They were together. And they were choosing to hope. That was terrifying. That was beautiful. That was everything. Dawn broke with the kind of clarity that promised trouble. Ethan had learned to read weather the way some men read books, and the sky spoke a language of gathering danger. Too clear, too still. The kind of calm that preceded violence. He said nothing to the passengers as they loaded up, but Riley caught his expression and understood. "Storm coming?" the young man asked quietly. "Something, maybe weather, maybe worse." "How much worse?" "The kind that shoots back." They'd entered territory that belonged to no one and everyone. Disputed land where Comanche hunting parties moved like smoke, where bandits preyed on travelers foolish enough to think safety came from numbers, where the bones of previous coaches lay scattered in arroyos as warnings no one heeded. Ethan kept the team moving at a steady pace, his eyes constantly scanning the ridgelines and draws where threats could hide. This close to Colorado, the road saw more traffic, which meant more opportunity for those who lived by taking rather than earning. Inside the coach, the mood had shifted. Even Hawkins had gone quiet, his businessman's bluster replaced by the tight-lipped anxiety of someone who finally understood the stakes. Thomas held Sarah close, whispering reassurances that sounded hollow even to him. And Eliza sat with her hands folded calmly in her lap, but Ethan noticed she'd positioned herself where she could see through both windows. She was ready for trouble. The realization should have concerned him. Instead, it made him trust her more. They'd covered maybe 8 miles when Ethan spotted the first sign, circling buzzards ahead, the lazy spirals that meant something dead or dying. He pulled the team to a halt. "What is it?" Riley asked, reaching for his rifle. "Don't know yet. Stay sharp." Ethan climbed down, his own rifle in hand, and approached cautiously. The smell hit him first, blood and death, still fresh. Then he saw them. 3 bodies. Men, by the look of them, though it was hard to tell through the damage. They'd been stripped of anything valuable, their clothes torn away, their bodies left for scavengers. But it was the way they died that made Ethan's gut tighten. Executed, shot in the back of the head at close range. Bandits! Riley had followed despite being told to stay with the coach. Looks like? Maybe 12 hours ago. Ethan studied the ground, reading the story written in disturbed earth and bloodstains. 4, maybe 5 attackers, took everything and moved west. Same direction we're heading. Yeah. We should turn back. Can't. Road behind us is still washed out. We go forward or we sit here and wait for them to circle back. Those aren't good options. This country doesn't deal in good options. Ethan turned back toward the coach. We keep moving, fast as we can without breaking the team, and we stay ready. He didn't mention what he'd noticed in the tracks, that whoever did this was methodical, professional, and clearly willing to kill for profit. These weren't desperate men making desperate choices. These were hunters who'd found easy prey. The passengers saw the bodies as they rolled past. Sarah turned away with a small cry. Thomas's face went pale. Hawkins looked sick. Only Eliza maintained her composure, though Ethan saw her hands tighten in her lap. "Should we bury them?" Thomas called out. "No time," Ethan replied, "and digging graves announces we're here. But to just leave them. They're past caring, we're not. Keep your eyes open and your mouth shut." It was harsh, but it was truth. The frontier had no patience for sentiment when survival was at stake. They pushed hard for the next 2 hours, Ethan driving the team faster than was wise, trying to put distance between themselves and whatever danger lurked in these hills. The horses sensed his urgency, leaning into their harnesses with the kind of effort that couldn't be sustained indefinitely. The landscape opened up as they descended into broader valley country. Less cover for ambush, but also less cover for them. Ethan chose speed over concealment, gambling that they could outrun trouble if it came. That's when he saw the riders. 5 of them, emerging from a draw about a quarter-mile ahead. They spread out across the road in a line that was unmistakably deliberate, unmistakably hostile. "Riley," Ethan said quietly. "Get ready." "How ready?" "All the way ready." Inside the coach, Eliza had already seen them. Ethan heard her voice, calm and commanding, telling the others to get down, to stay quiet, to let the driver handle it. Ethan didn't slow down. Instead, he drove straight at the riders, calling on the team for everything they had. It was a calculated risk. Sometimes showing fear invited attack, while showing confidence made predators reconsider. The riders held their ground until the last moment, then scattered to let the coach pass. Ethan caught glimpses of hard faces, calculating eyes, weapons held ready but not yet aimed. They were being evaluated, measured. The bandits were deciding if the coach was worth the effort. Ethan kept the team running for another mile before allowing them to slow. Behind them, the riders had reformed and were following at a distance that was neither aggressive nor accidental. "They're still there," Riley said, his voice tight. "I know. What do we do?" "We keep moving. Make them work for it. Maybe they'll decide easier prey exists somewhere else." "And if they don't?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then we fight." The afternoon stretched into a game of predator and prey. The riders maintained their distance, never quite catching up, but never falling behind. They were patient, professional, waiting for the right moment. Ethan knew what they were waiting for: a narrow section of road, a steep climb that would slow the coach, any terrain feature that would give them advantage. So he avoided those places, taking longer routes, burning precious time and horse stamina to stay in the open where the coach's speed was their best defense. But he couldn't avoid geography forever. Ahead, the road entered a canyon, narrow walls, limited visibility, no alternative route. If they were going to make their move, it would be there. Ethan pulled the coach to a halt at the canyon entrance. "What are you doing?" Riley asked. Giving them a choice. Ethan climbed down and walked back toward the following riders, his rifle in hand but pointed down. It was insane. It was also the only play he had. The riders stopped about 50 yards away. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then one of them, a lean man with a scar bisecting his left cheek, rode forward alone. "That's far enough," Ethan called out when the man was 20 feet away. The scarred rider stopped. "You're either brave or stupid, driver. Been accused of both. What do you want?" "You know what we want. Hand over the valuables and everyone lives." "Can't do that." "Can't or won't?" "Both. These people are under my protection. That means something to me, even if it doesn't to you." The rider laughed, though there was no humor in it. "Protection. That's noble. Also pointless. There's 5 of us, 2 of you, and that canyon's going to slow you down considerable. We'll take what we want either way. Question is whether we take it over your corpses." "Question is whether you're willing to die for it," Ethan replied. "Because that canyon works both ways. You come at us in there, you'll be bunched up. Easy targets. I'm a fair shot. My partner's passable. We'll kill at least 2 of you before you bring us down. Maybe 3 if we're lucky. Acceptable losses." "Really? You willing to be one of them?" The rider's smile faltered slightly. "You're bluffing." "Am I? You've been following us for hours. You had chances to hit us in open country, but you didn't. Know why? Because you're smart enough to recognize risk when you see it. This coach looks easy, but it's not, and deep down, you know it." Big words from a man outnumbered. Facts from a man with nothing to lose. "I die protecting these people, or I die giving up without a fight. Either way, I'm dead. So I choose the version where I take some of you with me. Makes the math simpler." The rider studied Ethan with eyes that had seen violence and measured men. After a long moment, he spoke again. "You've got sand. I'll give you that. But sand doesn't stop bullets." "No, but it makes bullets expensive, and you strike me as men who don't like expensive." Behind Ethan, the coach door opened. He didn't turn, couldn't afford to take his eyes off the rider, but he knew who it was before she spoke. "He's not alone," Eliza said, her voice carrying clearly across the distance. She stood beside the coach, a pistol in her hand, held with the easy competence of someone who knew how to use it. "You want this coach? You'll have to go through both of us. And whatever you think you'll gain isn't worth what you'll lose." The rider's eyes shifted to Eliza, reassessing. "A woman with a gun. Now I've seen everything." "Then you'll die seeing one more thing, the flash from the barrel when I shoot you." Eliza's voice was steady, almost conversational. "I'm a widow. Buried my husband 3 years ago. Since then, I've got nothing to lose and even less patience for men who think strength comes from numbers. So here's your choice. Ride away now or die testing whether I'm bluffing. Either way, I'll sleep tonight. Question is whether you will." Silence stretched between them. The other riders shifted uneasily, clearly not expecting resistance. Their leader's confidence was cracking, replaced by calculation. Ethan added one more piece to the scale. "You know what they found 3 miles back? 3 dead men, stripped and shot. I'm guessing that was your work. Smart play. Hit a group, take everything, leave no witnesses. But those men weren't armed, weren't ready. We are. And if you push this, someone's going to find 5 more bodies to bury. Maybe mine, maybe yours. You willing to bet which?" The scarred rider stared at them for what felt like an hour. Then slowly he smiled. Genuine this time, tinged with respect. "You got spine. Both of you. I respect that." He turned his horse. "We'll find easier pickings elsewhere." "Smart choice," Ethan said. "Don't think this makes us friends, driver. We meet again, different circumstances, and we'll finish this conversation different. Fair enough. The riders withdrew, fading back down the road, and eventually disappearing into the broken landscape. Ethan stood watching until he was certain they were gone, then turned to find Eliza still standing with the pistol, her hand now shaking slightly. "You can put that down," he said gently. She did, nearly dropping it. "I've never shot anyone." "They didn't know that." "I meant what I said, though, about dying before letting them take the coach." "I know you did. That's what sold it." Ethan moved closer. "You shouldn't have gotten out. That was dangerous." "So was you walking out there alone? We're a team now, remember? Teams don't let each other face danger solo." "Since when are we a team?" "Since the moment you stopped being alone and started caring whether you lived or died." Eliza met his eyes. "You would have done it, wouldn't you? Died protecting us." "Yeah." "Why?" "Because it matters. You were right about that. Connection matters. People matter. And I'm done pretending they don't." Something shifted in Eliza's expression. Pride mixed with fear. Hope tempered by understanding. "You're getting better at this. At being alive." "I have a good teacher." The moment was broken by Thomas climbing shakily out of the coach. "Are they gone? Is it over?" "For now," Ethan replied. "But we need to move, put distance between us and them in case they change their minds." They loaded up quickly, everyone's nerves singing with adrenaline and relief. As Ethan climbed back to his perch, Riley leaned over. "That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the stupidest." "Probably both." "Well, it worked. That's what matters." Ethan gathered the reins, but before he released the brake, Eliza's voice stopped him. "Ethan." He looked down to find her leaning out the coach window. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For choosing to live, even when dying would have been easier." He didn't have words for what those words did to him, so he just nodded and got the team moving, pushing them into the canyon he'd been dreading, finding it empty and safe and somehow anticlimactic after the confrontation they'd just survived. But as they emerged on the far side, with the worst of the danger behind them, Ethan realized something fundamental had changed. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was protecting. He was caring. He was living. And it was all because of the woman in the coach who'd looked at a dead man walking and decided he was worth saving. They made camp that night in a defensive position, backs to a cliff face, good sight lines, the horses picketed close. Nobody complained about the lack of comfort. They were all still processing how close they'd come to joining those bodies on the road. The fire burned low and hot, cooking beans that tasted like dust and hope in equal measure. Ethan found himself sitting closer to the group than usual, pulled into their orbit by something more than duty. "You were magnificent today," Sarah said quietly to Eliza. "I couldn't have done what you did." "You'd be surprised what you can do when the alternative is death," Eliza replied. "Fear makes cowards of us all, but it also makes heroes of ordinary people." "There was nothing ordinary about what you did," Thomas added, "standing there with that pistol like some kind of frontier warrior." "I was terrified. My hands didn't stop shaking for an hour." "Being scared and doing it anyway, that's the definition of courage," Hawkins said. It was the first thoughtful thing Ethan had heard from the man. "You saved us all today. You and Cade." "Ethan," Eliza corrected. "His name is Ethan." "Right, Ethan." Hawkins raised his tin cup in salute. "Here's to Ethan Cade, the stubbornest driver in the territory, and Eliza Hart, the bravest woman I've ever met. May we all reach Colorado alive enough to forget how close we came to not." They drank to that, bad coffee serving as champagne, exhaustion serving as victory. The conversation drifted to lighter topics, the kind of nervous chatter that followed survival. Plans for Colorado. Dreams of what came next. The small hopes that sustained people through impossible journeys. Ethan listened more than he spoke, content to absorb the warmth of human connection after years of cold isolation. This was what he'd been missing. Not just survival, but community. Not just breathing, but belonging. When the others finally retreated to sleep, Ethan took his watch position. But this time, Eliza didn't just visit. She settled beside him with clear intention to stay. "You should rest," he said. "So should you. Yet here we are." "Someone needs to keep watch. Then I'll keep it with you." She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "Besides, I'm too wound up to sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see those men on their horses, deciding whether to kill us. They chose not to. That's what matters. Because of you. Because you made them doubt. Eliza turned to look at him. Where did you learn to do that? To face down armed men like you were discussing the weather? Necessity. After I lost everything, I stopped caring whether I lived or died. Turns out, when you're not afraid of death, people can sense it. It makes them nervous. You're afraid now, though. Yeah, I am. Of what? Ethan was quiet for a long moment, gathering courage for honesty. Of this. Of you. Of caring enough that loss would break me all over again. And yet you do it anyway. Can't seem to help myself. You have that effect on people. Eliza smiled, but it was sad around the edges. My husband used to say I was like a lighthouse, too bright to ignore, too stubborn to go dark. He meant it as a compliment, I think. It is a compliment. The world needs lighthouses, especially in dark places. Is that what you are? A dark place? I was. Maybe still am in some ways, but you're making it harder to hide in the darkness. Good. You've hidden long enough. They fell into comfortable silence, watching stars wheel overhead in their eternal patterns. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called and was answered. The horses shifted and breathed. The fire crackled down to embers. One more day, Eliza said eventually. Tomorrow, we reach Colorado Springs. Yeah. And then what? I already told you. I take the coach back, pick up another run, keep driving. Is that really what you want? Ethan turned to face her fully. What I want is complicated. What I know how to do is simple. I've built a whole life around simple. Well, then maybe it's time to build something complicated. Eliza's hand found his. I know I'm asking a lot. I know we've only known each other a handful of days, but I also know that some connections don't need time to be real. They just are. And if I'm not ready, then I'll wait. I've gotten good at waiting, but I won't wait forever, Ethan. Life's too short and too uncertain. If you want something, you have to reach for it before it's gone. I'm reaching. I just don't know what I'm reaching for yet. Figure it out soon because we're running out of road. The truth of it hit him. Tomorrow they'd arrive. Eliza would reunite with her sister. The other passengers would scatter to their various destinations. And Ethan would face a choice he'd been avoiding since Santa Fe. Keep driving, keep running, keep hiding from the possibility of life. Or stop. Stay. Build something real with a woman who'd somehow cracked open his carefully sealed heart. The smart choice was obvious. The safe choice was clear. But Ethan had spent 8 years making smart, safe choices that had slowly killed him from the inside. Maybe it was time to choose differently. I'm scared, he admitted. Me too. What if I fail you? What if I can't be what you need? What if you can? What if we build something beautiful together? What if choosing life actually leads to living? Eliza squeezed his hand. The what-ifs will kill you if you let them. At some point, you just have to jump and trust you'll land somewhere good. And if I don't, then at least you jumped. At least you tried. At least you lived one more day as a man instead of a ghost. Ethan looked at this extraordinary woman who'd wandered into his carefully dead existence and forced him to feel again. She was right. She was terrifying. She was everything he'd spent years avoiding, and she was exactly what he needed. Okay, he said. Okay, what? Okay, I'll jump. I don't know where I'll land. Don't know what comes next. But I'll jump. Eliza's smile could have lit the entire frontier. That's all I ask. The rest we'll figure out together. They sat there in the darkness, hands intertwined, two broken people learning to be whole. The future was uncertain. Danger still lurked in every shadow, and nothing was guaranteed except that tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But for the first time in 8 years, Ethan Cade wasn't dreading tomorrow. He was curious about it, hopeful for it, ready to meet it as a living man instead of a walking corpse. That was Eliza's gift to him. Not answers, but questions. Not certainty, but possibility. Not safety, but the courage to risk being hurt again. It was the most terrifying gift anyone had ever given him. It was also the most precious. Dawn came with the promise of endings and beginnings. The final day of their journey stretched before them, 20 miles of relatively easy road leading to Colorado Springs and whatever waited there. The passengers woke with the nervous energy of travelers approaching destination. Sarah looked better, the lower altitude restoring color to her cheeks. Thomas was all anxious plans about their farm, talking too fast about land and crops and futures. Hawkins had resumed his bluster, already composing business letters in his head, and Eliza was quiet, staring out the window at landscape that was becoming familiar, face reflecting emotions Ethan couldn't quite read. "Nervous?" he asked as he helped her into the coach. "Terrified. It's been so long. What if Catherine doesn't recognize me? What if I don't recognize her children? What if it's wonderful?" Ethan interrupted. "What if you're exactly what each other needs? When did you become an optimist?" "About 30 seconds ago. I'm trying it on, seeing how it fits." Eliza laughed, and the sound loosened something in Ethan's chest. "It fits you well. I approve." "Good. Because I'm doing this for you." "No, you're doing it for yourself. I'm just the excuse." She was right. The change happening in him wasn't about her. It was about him finally choosing to live. Eliza had been the catalyst, but the choice was his alone. That made it more real, more permanent, more terrifying. They rolled out as the sun cleared the eastern peaks, painting the valley in gold and shadow. The road was good here, well-traveled, maintained, almost civilized. After days of treacherous terrain and constant danger, the easy miles felt almost anticlimactic. But Ethan remained alert. The frontier had taught him that danger loved complacency, that the moment you relaxed was when fate struck. They were maybe 5 miles from Colorado Springs when Riley spotted the smoke. "There," he pointed, "coming from the road ahead." Ethan saw it, a thin column rising from somewhere just beyond the next rise. Could be anything. Campfire, chimney smoke, grass fire, or trouble. "What do you think?" Riley asked. "I think we approach careful and ready." They crested the rise to find a freight wagon stopped in the middle of the road, one wheel broken, cargo scattered. A man worked frantically to repair the damage, while a woman and 2 small children huddled nearby, watching the horizon with fearful eyes. Ethan pulled the coach to a halt and climbed down, rifle ready. "Need help?" he called out. The man spun, reaching for a shotgun before recognizing them as fellow travelers rather than threats. "Thank the—" He stopped himself. "Yes. Wheel snapped an hour ago. I've been trying to jury-rig something, but it's not holding." "Indians?" "Haven't seen any, but we're exposed here. Every minute feels like borrowed time." Ethan assessed the situation quickly. The wagon was heavily loaded, the family clearly moving all their possessions. The broken wheel was beyond quick repair, and standing here made them all targets. "We can't tow you," he said. "Coach isn't built for it." "I know, just— Could you take my family? Get them to town safe? I'll stay with the wagon, wait for help." "You'll die here alone. Better me than all of us." It was the kind of impossible choice the frontier forced on people daily. Stay together and risk everyone. Separate and condemn one to probable death. There were no good options, only less terrible ones. Ethan looked at the woman and children, a girl maybe 8, a boy younger. They were terrified but trying to be brave, the way children did when they sensed their parents' fear. "Load your family and whatever valuables you can carry," he said. "We'll make room." "But the wagon is just things. Your people. People matter more." The man's eyes welled with tears. "I can't leave everything we own." "You can't take it where you're going if you're dead." Ethan's voice was firm but not unkind. "Make the smart choice. Things can be replaced. Family can't." It took 15 minutes to transfer the family and their most precious possessions. The coach was now dangerously overcrowded, 9 people in a space meant for 6, luggage piled on the roof. It would slow them down, make them less maneuverable. But it was the right thing to do. And for the first time in years, Ethan found that mattered more than efficiency. As they pulled away, the man stood beside his broken wagon, waving until they crested the next rise. Ethan didn't look back. Looking back at sacrifices made you doubt them, and doubt could paralyze. Inside the coach, Eliza was helping the family settle in, her natural kindness creating calm from chaos. The children were scared but responding to her gentle questions, slowly relaxing. Ethan pushed the team hard, wanting to cover the remaining miles quickly. The horses protested the additional weight, but they gave him what he asked because that's what good horses did. Colorado Springs appeared on the horizon like a promise. Buildings, streets, civilization. After weeks of wilderness, it looked like salvation. They rolled into town as the sun reached its zenith, the coach rattling down Main Street toward the staging depot. People stopped to stare at the overcrowded vehicle, recognizing the signs of trouble survived. Ethan brought the team to a halt with a mixture of relief and something approaching regret. The journey was over. Whatever came next was unwritten. The passengers tumbled out, thanking him with words that felt inadequate to the shared experience. Hawkins pressed money into his hand, a tip far larger than necessary. Thomas and Sarah embraced him like family. The Freight family cried and promised to pray for him, which Ethan accepted with awkward grace. And Eliza stood apart, watching him with eyes that held questions and fears and hopes in equal measure. He climbed down and walked to her, suddenly aware that this was the moment. The choice he'd been avoiding was here, demanding to be made. "So," she said. "So, what now?" Ethan looked at this woman who'd saved his life by forcing him to live it. He thought about 8 years of running, of hiding, of choosing death over the risk of living. He thought about his wife and daughter, about whether they'd want him trapped in perpetual mourning or freed to find joy again. And he thought about tomorrow, about the possibility of more, about building something instead of driving past it. The choice crystallized. Not easy, not simple, but clear. "Now," he said, "I find your sister's house, help you settle in, meet your nieces, and then I figure out what staying looks like, because I'm done running, Eliza. I'm done being a ghost. You showed me I could be alive again, and I'll be damned if I waste that gift." Tears streamed down Eliza's face, joy and relief and fear all mixed together. "You mean it?" "I mean it. I'm terrified. I'll probably fail at it, but I'm choosing life. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing to see what comes next instead of hiding from it." That's all I wanted to hear. She stepped into his arms, and Ethan held her like she was precious and breakable and eternal all at once. Around them, the town moved and breathed and lived. But in that moment, his entire world was the woman in his arms who'd given him back his heart. The frontier was still dangerous. Tomorrow would still bring challenges, and nothing was guaranteed except uncertainty. But Ethan Cade, stage driver, ghost, dead man walking, had chosen to live, and that choice changed everything. Eliza's sister lived on the eastern edge of Colorado Springs, in a modest house with a wraparound porch and a garden that showed the careful attention of someone who believed in making beauty from hard ground. Ethan drove the coach there himself, unable to trust anyone else with this particular delivery, this particular passenger who'd become so much more than cargo. Catherine opened the door before they'd even stopped, recognizing her sister through years and distance with the kind of knowing that only blood could produce. She was taller than Eliza, her hair darker, but they shared the same clear eyes and the same way of standing that suggested strength earned rather than inherited. "Eliza," Catherine breathed, and then they were running toward each other, colliding in an embrace that made Ethan look away, giving them privacy in a moment too raw for witnesses. He busied himself unhitching the team, giving the sisters time to cry and laugh and hold each other with the desperation of people who'd thought this moment might never come. When he finally looked up, 2 small girls had appeared on the porch, watching with wide eyes as their mother wept. "Girls, come meet your Aunt Eliza," Catherine called, wiping her face. "The one I've told you about 1,000 times." The children approached cautiously, the way children did around strangers who were supposedly family. The older one, Emma, Ethan remembered, had her mother's dark hair and serious expression. The younger, Charlotte, was all wild curls and barely contained energy. "You're really our aunt?" Emma asked. "I really am," Eliza said, kneeling down to their level. "And you're even more beautiful than your mother's letters said." "Letters lie sometimes," Charlotte observed with the brutal honesty of the young. "Charlotte," Catherine looked mortified, but Eliza laughed. "She's right. Letters do lie sometimes, but not your mother's. She wrote that you were smart and brave and honest, and I can already see all 3. Charlotte beamed. Emma remained skeptical but seemed willing to withhold final judgment. It was Catherine who noticed Ethan standing awkwardly by the coach. And who's this, your driver? This is Ethan Cade, Eliza said, and something in her voice made Catherine's eyebrows rise. He kept me alive across 200 miles of country that tried very hard to kill me, multiple times. Just doing my job, Ethan said. He's being modest, Eliza countered. He faced down bandits, crossed flooded rivers, and drove through storms that would have broken lesser men. He's also the reason I'm standing here instead of in a shallow grave somewhere in New Mexico. Catherine studied Ethan with the kind of assessment sisters reserved for men their siblings cared about. He felt evaluated, measured, and probably found wanting in ways he couldn't quite identify. Well then, Catherine said finally, I suppose that merits dinner at minimum. You'll stay, Mr. Cade? I should get the coach back to the depot. Let someone else handle that, Eliza interrupted. Please. Stay. At least for a few hours. The please did it. Ethan found himself unable to refuse her anything when she asked like that, with hope and vulnerability mixed in equal measure. A few hours, he agreed. Catherine's husband, James, arrived home an hour later to find his house suddenly full of women, children, and a taciturn stage driver who looked deeply uncomfortable sitting at a proper dinner table. James was a rancher, built solid from years of hard work, with the kind of calm competence that came from managing both land and livestock. So you brought my sister-in-law home safe, James said, shaking Ethan's hand. That's worth more than I can express. She made it easy. Didn't complain once, even when complaining was justified. That sounds like Eliza. Catherine's the same way. Must run in the family. Dinner was chaos in the way that families created chaos. Children talking over each other, Catherine and Eliza finishing each other's sentences, James asking questions about the journey that Ethan answered with characteristic brevity. It was loud and warm and utterly foreign to Ethan's experience of the last 8 years. And he loved it. Not in a comfortable way. More like how you loved standing near a fire after being frozen. It hurt a little, waking up sensation in parts that had gone numb. But it was a good hurt, a healing hurt. Uncle Ethan, Charlotte announced, apparently having decided he deserved the honorary title, do you have any children? The table went silent. Ethan saw Eliza tense, saw Catherine shoot her daughter a warning look. I did once, Ethan said quietly. A daughter. She'd be about your sister's age now if she'd lived. What happened to her? Charlotte, that's enough, Catherine started. It's all right, Ethan interrupted. He looked at the young girl with her curious eyes and unfiltered questions. She died in a fire, a long time ago, before you were born. That's sad. Yeah, it is. Do you still miss her? Every day. Charlotte considered this with the seriousness children brought to important matters. Mama says missing people means you love them, so it's okay to be sad. But you shouldn't be sad forever because they wouldn't want that. Out of the mouths of children, Ethan thought, came the same wisdom Eliza had been trying to teach him for weeks. Maybe because children understood grief without the complicated layers adults added to it. Your mama's right, Ethan said, and I'm trying to be less sad. It's hard, but I'm trying. Aunt Eliza can help. She's good at making people feel better. She is. She's already helped me more than she knows. Eliza's eyes met his across the table, and in them Ethan saw understanding and something deeper. Love, maybe. Or the beginning of it. He wasn't quite ready to name it yet, but he could feel it growing, taking root in soil he'd thought permanently barren. After dinner, while Catherine put the girls to bed and James checked on the horses, Ethan and Eliza found themselves alone on the porch, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Your family is wonderful, Ethan said. They are, aren't they? I'd forgotten what it felt like to be surrounded by that kind of normalcy, of love. She leaned against the porch rail. Thank you for staying. I know it's not comfortable for you. It's getting more comfortable, slowly. He paused. Your niece is wise beyond her years. Charlotte? She has no filter. Says whatever she's thinking. It's terrifying and refreshing in equal measure. She's right, though. About missing people. About not being sad forever. She learned that from Catherine, who learned it from our mother, who learned it from surviving things that should have destroyed her. Eliza turned to face him. Strength runs in families, so does wisdom, but so does pain. The trick is passing down the first two without letting the third consume everything. Is that what you're doing? Breaking the cycle? Trying to, same as you. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the street settle into evening quiet. Somewhere a dog barked. A horse whinnied, these ordinary sounds of civilization that Ethan had avoided for years. I need to tell you something, Eliza said eventually, and you're not going to like it. Ethan's stomach tightened. All right. I lied to you, back on the trail. Not about anything important, but about my plans. What do you mean? I told you I was coming to visit Catherine to see if happiness was possible out here. She took a breath. Truth is, I was planning to stay, to make a home here, build a life. I was running from grief the same as you, just in a different direction. That's not lying, that's just not telling the whole truth. It feels like lying, because I let you think this was temporary, that I'd visit and leave. But I'm not leaving, Ethan. This is home now. Or it will be, once I find a place and figure out what comes next. Ethan absorbed this, feeling something shift in his chest. Why are you telling me this? Because you said you'd stay. You said you'd figure out what staying looks like. And I need you to know that if you're staying for me, you're staying for someone who's also figuring it out. We'd be building something from scratch. No roadmap, no guarantees, just two broken people trying to make something whole. That scares you. Terrifies me. What if we fail? What if I'm asking too much? What if... Ethan kissed her. Not planned, not smooth, just a sudden impulse he couldn't contain. She startled for a moment, then melted into it, her hands finding his shoulders, anchoring herself to something solid. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. I'm staying because I want to, he said quietly. Not just for you, for me. Because driving stages meant I never had to stop, never had to build, never had to risk putting down roots that could be torn up. But I'm tired of running, tired of surviving instead of living. So yeah, I'm terrified. Yeah, we'll probably fail at parts of this, but I'd rather fail trying to build something real than succeed at staying numb. When did you get so good with words? When I met a woman who refused to let me hide behind silence. Eliza laughed, the sound carrying joy and relief in equal measure. So we're doing this? We're actually trying? We're trying. I don't know what it looks like yet. Don't know if I'm even capable of what you need, but I'm choosing to find out. That's all I ask. The rest we'll figure out together. They kissed again, longer this time, with more certainty and less fear. And standing on that porch under Colorado stars, Ethan Cade felt something he hadn't felt in 8 years. Hope. Real, terrifying, beautiful hope. The next morning, Ethan returned to the staging depot to settle his affairs. The manager, a different man than Buchanan back in Santa Fe, but cut from the same cloth, listened to his intention to quit with barely concealed irritation. You're one of my best drivers, the manager said. Can't just replace you on a whim. Not a whim, a choice. I'm done driving. What'll you do instead? You got no skills besides handling horses. Then I'll use those skills doing something else. Ranch work, maybe. Freight hauling, breaking horses. Something that doesn't mean living on a coach seat. The manager studied him. This about a woman? It's about deciding to live instead of just not dying. The woman's part of it, but not all of it. Love makes men stupid. Maybe. But loneliness makes them dead inside. I'll take stupid over dead. The manager sighed, recognizing defeat. Fine. Give me 2 weeks to find a replacement. You can do short hauls around town until then. Nothing that takes you away more than a day. It was more grace than Ethan had expected. Fair enough. Walking out of that depot felt like shedding a skin he'd been wearing too long. The world looked different somehow, brighter, more present, more real. He'd spent years seeing everything through the lens of threat assessment and route planning. Now he was just seeing. It was strange. It was wonderful. It was terrifying. He found work quickly enough. James knew ranchers who needed skilled hands, and Ethan's reputation as a driver who could handle difficult horses translated well. Within a week, he'd hired on at a spread 10 miles outside town, working with a string of half-wild horses that needed breaking for saddle and harness. The work was hard, bruising, exhausting, the kind that left him falling into bed each night too tired to think. But it was good hard, the kind that built something instead of just preventing disaster. And crucially, it meant he was in one place, sleeping in the same bunk, seeing the same faces, building something that looked almost like routine. He saw Eliza 3 times that first week. Brief visits, stolen hours between his work, and her own efforts to establish herself. She'd found a job teaching at the small schoolhouse in town, putting her education to use in a way that fed her soul. "The children are wonderful," she told him on one of those visits, her face alight with enthusiasm. "Challenging, yes, but wonderful. Today one of them asked me why the sky is blue, and I realized I didn't actually know. So we're going to research it together, turn it into a lesson about light and science and asking questions." "You're good at this, teaching." "I am, aren't I?" She sounded surprised at her own success. "I'd forgotten. After Michael died, I forgot there were things I was good at, things I could build. I just existed, went through motions. But this feels like purpose. I know the feeling. Working with the horses, it's different than driving, better, more present." "Are you happy?" The question stopped him. Happiness wasn't something he'd considered pursuing. Survival, yes. Numbness, definitely. But happiness? "I don't know if I'd call it happy yet," he said carefully, "but I'd call it hopeful, and that's closer than I've been in years. Hopeful is a start. Hopeful leads to happy if you let it." They were sitting in Catherine's kitchen, sharing coffee, while the girls played outside and Catherine worked on mending. It was domestic and ordinary and exactly what Ethan had been avoiding, and it was perfect. "I want to do this right," Ethan said suddenly. "Whatever this is between us, I want to do it properly." Eliza's eyebrows rose. "Properly how?" "Court you. Like a man with honorable intentions. Take you to dinner, walk you home. Ask your brother-in-law's permission before we what?" Ethan felt heat rise in his face. Declarations of intent weren't his strong suit. "Before I ask you to marry me, eventually, when the time's right, if that's something you'd want." Eliza set down her coffee cup very carefully. "Ethan Cade, are you planning to propose to me?" "Not today, not tomorrow, but yes, at some point, if you'll have me, if I can become the kind of man who deserves you." "You already are that man. You just haven't realized it yet." "I'm working on it. Every day, I'm working on it." Catherine had stopped her mending, listening without pretense of privacy. Now she spoke up. "You're serious about my sister." It wasn't a question, but Ethan answered anyway. "Yes, ma'am. More serious than I've been about anything in a very long time. You know she's been through hell, lost her husband, spent years barely surviving. She deserves someone who'll treat her like the miracle she is." "I know, and I'm not sure I'm that someone, but I'm willing to spend the rest of my life trying to be." Catherine and Eliza exchanged a look that contained entire conversations Ethan couldn't parse. Then Catherine nodded. "Good enough for me. James will want to talk to you properly, of course. Make sure your intentions are honorable and all that masculine posturing, but speaking for myself, I approve." "Catherine," Eliza looked mortified. "What? Someone has to say it plainly. The man's trying to do right by you. Least we can do is not make him suffer unnecessarily." Catherine returned to her mending with a small smile. "Besides, I like him. Anyone who can handle you deserves credit. I'm not that difficult." "You're exactly that difficult, but in the best way." Ethan watched the sisters bicker with the ease of long familiarity, and something warm settled in his chest. This was family. This was belonging. This was what he'd been missing without knowing he missed it. The conversation with James came that weekend. They rode out to check fence lines on the ranch where Ethan was working, just 2 men on horseback doing work that didn't strictly need 2 men. It was clearly orchestrated, and Ethan appreciated the directness. "So," James said after they'd ridden in silence for a mile, "my wife tells me you have intentions toward her sister." "I do." "Serious intentions?" "Yes, sir." "You know Eliza's been through a lot. She's not some young girl looking for romance. She's a woman who's buried a husband and rebuilt herself from grief. She doesn't need saving." "I know. That's part of why I respect her. She saved herself. She's just giving me the roadmap to do the same." James seemed to approve of this answer. "What can you offer her, besides good intentions and horse skills?" "Honestly, not much. I've got some savings, a reputation for hard work, and a commitment to building something real instead of just passing through. Ethan paused. I can't promise we'll be rich, can't promise easy, but I can promise I'll show up every day and try to be better than I was yesterday. That's more than most men can promise. You love her? The question should have been easy, but Ethan found himself struggling with the weight of that word. Love. It felt too big, too dangerous, too loaded with memory of the last time he'd loved someone and lost them. I'm learning how, he said finally. I forgot what love looked like after I lost my family. Forgot how to feel it, how to give it. But Eliza's teaching me. Every day she's teaching me. So am I there yet? Maybe not fully, but I'm getting there, and I won't stop trying. James was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the horizon. You know what I see when I look at you, Ethan? I see a man who's been beaten down by life and is choosing to get back up. That takes more courage than anything else, and it tells me you've got the spine to handle what marriage requires. Which is? Showing up. Especially when it's hard. Especially when you want to run. Marriage isn't about the good days. Those take care of themselves. It's about the days when everything's falling apart, and you choose to stay anyway. You capable of that? I've spent 8 years running. I'm done. Whatever comes, I stay. Then you have my blessing, for what it's worth. It's worth everything. Thank you. They finished the fence line in companionable silence, but Ethan felt something settle in him. Permission. Not just from James, but from himself. Permission to move forward, to build, to risk loving again. By the time autumn arrived, Ethan had saved enough for a small down payment on land, 20 acres on the outskirts of town, with a creek running through it and good grass for horses. It needed work. The cabin was barely habitable. The barn needed a new roof, and the fences were more holes than wire. But it was his, and with effort, it could become theirs. He showed it to Eliza on a crisp October afternoon when the aspens had turned gold and the air carried the promise of winter. It's rough, he admitted as they walked the property. Needs months of work before it's even close to livable. It's beautiful, Eliza said, her eyes taking in the sweep of land and sky. I can see it, Ethan, what it could become. A home, maybe a small horse operation, something we build together. You're already planning. Someone has to. You're too busy being practical. She turned to face him. Are you asking me what I think you're asking me? Ethan's heart hammered. This was it. The moment he'd been building toward without quite admitting it. He had no ring, no prepared speech, no romance novel gesture. Just honesty and hope, and a fierce desire to stop being alone. Eliza Hart, he said, taking her hands. I'm not good with words. Never have been. And I can't promise you easy. This land needs work. I need work. We'd be building from scratch, figuring it out as we go. Ethan, but I can promise you I'll show up every day, every hard day, every good day, every day in between. I'll show up and try to be the man you see when you look at me. The one who's brave enough to live instead of just survive. The tears were streaming down Eliza's face now, but she was smiling. Is there a question in there somewhere? Will you marry me? Will you take this rough land and this rougher man and help me build something worth having? Yes, 1,000 times yes. They kissed there among the golden aspens with the creek singing nearby and the mountain standing witness. And Ethan felt the last piece of his frozen heart crack open, flooding him with warmth and possibility and terrifying, wonderful love. He was alive. Truly, completely alive for the first time in 8 years. And it was all because a brave woman had looked at a dead man walking and decided he was worth saving. They married in December in Catherine's front room with snow falling outside and a fire crackling in the hearth. The ceremony was small, just Catherine's family, a few friends Ethan had made at the ranch, and the circuit preacher who happened to be passing through. Eliza wore a simple blue dress that made her eyes shine. Ethan wore new clothes that felt stiff and uncomfortable but seemed important for the occasion. They stumbled through vows, both nervous, both certain, both choosing this leap into the unknown together. When the preacher pronounced them married, Ethan kissed his wife and felt the weight of the past finally, fully release its grip. He would always remember his first family, would always carry that loss. But it no longer defined him. He was Ethan Cade, husband to Eliza, landowner, horsebreaker, builder of futures. He was alive and loved and choosing every day to keep living. That night, in the cabin they'd spent months making habitable, Eliza lay in his arms and traced patterns on his chest. "Happy?" she asked. "More than I thought possible. Scared?" "Terrified. What if I mess this up? What if I'm not enough?" "Then we'll fix it together. That's what marriage is, fixing things together." She propped herself up on one elbow. "You saved me, you know." "I thought you saved me." "We saved each other. That's better." Ethan pulled her close, marveling at the simple miracle of having someone to hold, someone who held him back, someone who chose him despite knowing all his broken pieces. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering their land in white silence. Inside, the fire burned warm and steady. And between them, love grew, new and fragile but rooted deep, strong enough to weather whatever storms the frontier had left to throw at them. Ethan Cade had spent 8 years dying slowly. Now he was living fast, choosing joy, building a future he'd thought impossible. The ghost had become a man again. And that man was finally, beautifully, completely home. Spring came to Colorado with the violence of rebirth. The creek that ran through Ethan and Eliza's property swelled with snowmelt, turning from a gentle whisper to a roaring conversation. The land transformed from winter brown to impossible green almost overnight, and with it came the work that defined frontier life: planting, building, surviving, thriving. Ethan was mending fence on a morning when the sky promised weather when he saw the rider approaching. Something in the way the man sat his horse, too stiff, too purposeful, made Ethan's hand drift toward the rifle leaning against a fence post. The rider stopped 20 feet away, raising both hands to show he meant no threat. "Ethan Cade?" "Depends who's asking." "Name's Marshall William Cross, out of Denver. Got some questions if you've got time." Ethan set down his tools and walked closer, keeping himself between the marshal and the house where Eliza was baking bread. Old instincts died hard. "What kind of questions?" "The kind about a stagecoach robbery that happened back in January, down near the New Mexico border." Cross pulled a worn photograph from his coat. 5 men hit a Wells Fargo stage, killed the driver and guard, made off with $20,000 in gold. "I heard about that. Wasn't my run." "No, but I'm tracking the men who did it, and according to witnesses, you had a run-in with a group matching their description. 5 riders, led by a man with a scar on his face." The memory crashed back. That tense standoff. Eliza stepping out with her pistol, the scarred rider choosing to back down. Ethan had put it out of his mind, another piece of the journey he'd survived and moved past. "I remember them. They tried to shake us down outside a canyon. We convinced them to look elsewhere." "How'd you manage that? These men aren't known for backing down easy." "I told them the truth. That taking us would cost more than it was worth. That we'd kill some of them before we went down." Ethan met the marshal's eyes. "And my wife stepped out with a loaded pistol, and the kind of courage that makes men reconsider their choices." Cross's eyebrows rose. "Your wife faced down 5 armed bandits?" "She faced down more than that on our trip. Woman's got spine made of steel and a heart that refuses to quit. They saw that. Decided easier prey existed. Well, those men went on to kill 6 people over the next month. Would have been more if we hadn't caught 3 of them last week." Cross shifted in his saddle. "The other 2 are still out there, and one of them is the leader, the one with the scar." Ice formed in Ethan's gut. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I think they're headed this way. We found a letter on one of the men we captured. It mentioned unfinished business in Colorado Springs. A stage driver who embarrassed them. A woman who made them look weak." Cross's voice was grim. "Men like these don't forget humiliation, and they don't leave debts unpaid. You think they're coming for us?" "I think it's possible, probable even. So I'm here to warn you, to suggest maybe you and your wife take a trip somewhere. Visit family, wait until we catch these last 2. Run, you mean. Survive, I mean. There's no shame in avoiding a fight you don't need to have." Ethan looked back at the house, at the smoke rising from the chimney, at the life he'd built here. 6 months ago, he would have run without hesitation, would have seen it as the smart play, the survival move, the logical choice. But that was 6 months ago. That was when he was still learning to be alive again. "No," Ethan said. "Mr. Cade, This is my home, my land, my wife. I spent 8 years running from everything. I'm done running. If they come, they come. But I won't abandon what I've built out of fear. Cross studied him for a long moment. You're either very brave or very foolish. Probably both, but it's my choice to make. Fair enough, but at least be smart about it. Keep weapons close. Watch your perimeter. Don't travel alone. Cross gathered his reins. And if you see them, you send for me immediately. Don't try to be a hero. Heroes die young. I'm just trying to stay alive long enough to grow old with my wife. After the marshal left, Ethan stood in the yard for a long time, weighing options and consequences. He could tell Eliza, burden her with this threat, or he could handle it quietly, keep her safe through vigilance and preparation without adding fear to her days. But that was the old Ethan thinking, the man who carried everything alone, who protected people by keeping them ignorant. The new Ethan, the one Eliza had helped create, knew better. He found her in the kitchen, flour dusting her hands and face, smiling at something only she knew. The sight of her, so alive, so present, so thoroughly his, made his chest ache with love and fear in equal measure. That was a long conversation for a fence line, she observed. It wasn't about fences, it was about those bandits, the ones we faced on the road. Eliza's smile faded. What about them? Ethan told her everything, the robbery, the murders, the marshal's warning. He watched her process it, saw fear flicker across her face before being replaced by something harder. Determination. So they might come here, she said when he finished. The marshal thinks it's possible. And he suggested we run. He suggested we be smart. Smart would be running, but that's not what you want to do. No, I want to stay, want to fight if it comes to that, want to protect what we've built. He moved closer. But this isn't just my choice. It's yours too. If you want to leave, we leave. No argument. Eliza was quiet for a moment, her hand still on the dough she'd been kneading. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. I spent 3 years running from my grief after Michael died. Moving from place to place, never settling, never building anything that could be taken away again. It was safe. It was also empty. She met his eyes. I'm done being empty, Ethan. Done letting fear make my choices. This is our home. If someone wants to take it, they'll have to go through both of us. You understand what that means. What might happen. I understand that some things are worth fighting for, and that running just means we lose without trying. She wiped flour from her hands. Besides, you married a woman who faced down bandits on a stagecoach. Did you think I'd suddenly become timid? Despite the gravity of the situation, Ethan smiled. No, I suppose I didn't. Good. Then we prepare. We stay alert. And we live our lives without letting these men steal our peace before they even arrive. It was the right answer. The brave answer. The answer that made Ethan love her even more fiercely. Over the next weeks, they prepared as best they could. Ethan taught Eliza to shoot properly, not just holding a pistol for show, but actually hitting what she aimed at. She was a quick study, her hands steady, her eyes sharp. They established signals, safe places, escape routes if the worst happened. But they also lived. They worked the land, broke horses, planted their garden. They had dinner with Catherine's family every Sunday, played with the girls, laughed at James's stories. They built furniture for the cabin, argued about where to put it, made love in the bed they'd constructed together from rough lumber and determination. They lived because living was the point. Living was the victory the bandits couldn't touch, unless Ethan and Eliza surrendered it. Summer arrived with heat that made the air shimmer and turned the grass golden. Ethan was working with a particularly stubborn gelding when he felt it. That old instinct from his driving days, the one that said danger was close. He looked up to see 2 riders on the ridge overlooking his property. Even from a distance, he recognized the silhouette of the lead rider. The scar was invisible at this range, but the posture, the way he sat his horse, was unmistakable. They'd come. Ethan released the gelding and walked calmly toward the house, not running, not showing fear, but moving with purpose. Eliza was inside, teaching Charlotte her letters while Catherine was in town. The girls shouldn't be here for what was coming. Eliza, he said quietly from the doorway, take Charlotte to Catherine's, now. Don't argue. She read his face and understood immediately. They're here. On the ridge, two of them, the leader and one other. I'm not leaving you. Charlotte needs to get somewhere safe. Take her. Then if you want to come back, come back. But get her out first. It was the right argument. Eliza couldn't refuse the safety of her niece. She gathered the girl quickly, speaking calmly so as not to frighten her, and headed toward the barn for a horse. Ethan watched them go, then turned back toward the ridge. The riders hadn't moved, hadn't approached. They were watching, evaluating, making their own calculations. He could run, could grab Eliza and the girl and race for town, for the marshal, for help. But running meant leaving everything exposed, the animals, the cabin, the life they'd built. And more than that, it meant returning to being the man who fled from every hard thing. So instead, Ethan walked to the porch, collected his rifle, and sat down in the rocking chair he'd made last month. He set the rifle across his lap, visible but not threatening, and waited. After 10 minutes, the riders came down from the ridge. They approached slowly, hands visible, weapons holstered. Playing at civility while threat radiated from every movement. They stopped 30 feet from the porch. The scarred man smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who'd cornered prey. "Well now," he said. "The brave stage driver. Didn't expect to find you playing farmer." "Life takes you strange places," Ethan replied, his voice neutral. "What brings you to my land?" "Unfinished business. See, you embarrassed us back on that road. Made us look weak in front of witnesses. That's not something we can let stand. The witnesses are scattered across Colorado by now. Your reputation survived." "Maybe, but our pride didn't." The scarred man's smile widened. "Besides, we heard you settled down, got married, built yourself a nice little place here. Seems a shame for all that to burn because you didn't know when to keep your mouth shut." The threat was clear. Ethan felt rage building in his chest, hot and dangerous and familiar. This was what he'd been 8 years ago, before grief froze him. A man who protected what was his with whatever violence was necessary. But he was also something new now, something Eliza had taught him to be. A man who chose his battles but didn't back down from the ones that mattered. "Here's how this goes," Ethan said quietly. "You turn around right away, and we all live to see tomorrow. Or you push this, and at least one of you dies today. Maybe both. Maybe me too. But I guarantee you don't walk away clean." Big words from one man. Not one man. Two. Eliza's voice came from the barn, and Ethan's heart sank even as pride surged through him. She stood in the doorway, rifle shouldered, aimed directly at the second rider. "Sent the girl away," she explained calmly. "But I wasn't leaving you to face this alone. We're partners, remember?" The scarred man laughed. "The woman again. You make a habit of hiding behind her skirts." "I make a habit of standing beside my wife," Ethan corrected. "There's a difference. And she's not someone you hide behind. She's someone you fight alongside." Touching, but it doesn't change the math. Two of you, two of us. Except we're faster and meaner and you're soft from playing house. Maybe. Or maybe you're underestimating what people will do to protect home. Ethan stood slowly, keeping the rifle casual but ready. Last chance. Ride away. Live. Make better choices. For a moment, the world held its breath. Ethan could see the calculation in the scarred man's eyes, weighing pride against survival, vengeance against sense. Then the man's hand dropped toward his gun. Everything happened in the space between heartbeats. The scarred man drew. Ethan was faster. 8 years of survival instinct compressed into muscle memory. His rifle came up and fired in one smooth motion. The bullet took the scarred man in the chest, punching him backward off his horse. The second rider was drawing when Eliza's rifle cracked. Her shot hit him in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. He tried to bring his gun up anyway, determined or desperate. Ethan's second shot ended that determination permanently. Then silence. Profound and terrible silence broken only by the ringing in Ethan's ears and the frightened whinnying of horses. 2 bodies lay in the yard. Ethan's hands were steady on the rifle, but his heart hammered like it was trying to escape his chest. Beside him, Eliza had lowered her weapon, her face pale, but composed. "Are you hurt?" Ethan asked. "No. You?" "No." They stood there processing what had just happened, what they'd just done. The violence that had been necessary but would still haunt quiet moments for years to come. We should get the marshal, Eliza said finally. Yeah. But neither of them moved. They stood together in the yard of the home they'd built, surrounded by the evidence of what protecting that home had cost, and held each other's hands like lifelines. Marshal Cross arrived 2 hours later with 3 deputies. He surveyed the scene with the weary eyes of a man who'd seen too much death but understood its necessity. Self-defense, he said after hearing their account and examining the bodies. Clear as day. These men drew first, you responded. No charges. What happens now? Eliza asked. Now I take the bodies back to Denver. Close the case on the Wells Fargo robbery, and you two get to live your lives without looking over your shoulders. Just like that? Just like that. You did the territory a favor, truth be told. These men had a lot of blood on their hands. Better they stopped here than after killing more innocent people. It should have felt like victory, like justice. Instead, it just felt heavy. Necessary, but heavy. After the marshal left, taking the bodies and the worst of the evidence with him, Ethan and Eliza stood in their yard watching the sun set over mountains that didn't care about human violence or human peace. I've never killed anyone before, Eliza said quietly. I have, long time ago. Different life. Ethan pulled her closer. It doesn't get easier. You just learn to live with it. Do you regret it? What we did? No. They came to hurt us, to take what we built. We stopped them. That's not something to regret. He paused. But I regret that it was necessary. Regret that the frontier's still so raw that violence is sometimes the only answer. Will it always be this way? This hard? I don't know. But I know we'll face it together. Whatever comes, hard or easy, violent or peaceful, we face it together. Eliza leaned into him, and they stood there as darkness gathered. 2 people who'd survived another test the frontier had thrown at them. The next morning, James arrived with a crew of ranch hands. They'd heard what happened. News traveled fast in frontier communities, and came to help clean up, to repair what had been damaged, to show solidarity in the way that mattered most. You did what needed doing, James said, working alongside Ethan to fix bullet holes in the barn wall. No one faults you for that. Some will. Let them. The people who matter understand. Out here, sometimes the only law is what you enforce yourself. You enforced it fair and square. Catherine brought food and spent hours with Eliza, just sitting with her, letting her process without forcing conversation. It was the kind of grace that came from understanding trauma couldn't be rushed. Over the next weeks, life slowly returned to something approaching normal. The garden grew. The horses got gentler. Ethan and Eliza fell back into routines that had been disrupted by violence, but not destroyed by it. But something had changed. Ethan felt it in the way Eliza held him at night, tighter, more desperately, as if afraid he might disappear. He felt it in his own awareness of how fragile everything was, how quickly it could all be taken away. One night, a month after the shooting, Eliza broke the silence they'd been maintaining. I'm scared, she admitted. Not of them. They're dead. But of what comes next? What if there's someone else? What if this happens again? Then we handle it again. I don't know if I can. I keep seeing it, Ethan. Every time I close my eyes, I see him falling, see the blood, hear the sound. Ethan pulled her close, feeling her trembling against him. I know. It's going to haunt you for a while, maybe forever, but it gets quieter over time. The memories don't go away, but they stop screaming. How do you know? Because I've lived with memories that screamed for 8 years, and somehow they got quieter. Not gone, never gone, but quieter. You taught me that. Taught me that carrying hard things was possible if you didn't carry them alone. So we carry this together? Together. Always together. They held each other through the night, 2 people learning that strength wasn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it and keep going anyway. Summer faded into autumn, and with it came news that Colorado was changing. The railroad was coming, bringing civilization and commerce and all the complications thereof. Towns were growing. Laws were being enforced more consistently. The raw frontier was slowly being tamed. Ethan watched these changes with mixed feelings. Part of him mourned the passing of the wild country he'd known, but mostly he felt relief. Relief that maybe, just maybe, The violence would become rarer. That his children, if he and Eliza were blessed with children, might grow up in a world where survival didn't require constant vigilance. That thought stopped him one evening while he was finishing the day's work. Children. He and Eliza had talked about it in abstract terms, someday possibilities. But suddenly, it felt real, urgent, important. He found Eliza in the garden, harvesting the last of the summer vegetables before frost claimed them. "I want a family," he said, without preamble. Eliza looked up, surprise flickering across her face. What brought this on? Everything. The shooting, the changes coming, the realization that life's too short and too uncertain to wait for perfect moments. He knelt beside her in the dirt. "I want children with you. Want to build something that outlasts us. Want to create life instead of just surviving it." Tears welled in Eliza's eyes. "I want that too. I've been wanting it but afraid to ask. Afraid you weren't ready. I'm terrified. What if I fail them like I failed my daughter? What if something happens and I can't protect them? Then we'll grieve together and keep going. That's what we do." Eliza cupped his face in her dirt-stained hands. "But we can't let fear of loss prevent us from living. You taught me that. Or I taught you that. Or we taught each other. The point is, we know it's true. So we try? We try." They made love that night with new intentionality, not just passion, but purpose, creating rather than just connecting. And afterward, lying in the darkness with Eliza's head on his chest, Ethan felt something profound settle over him. Peace. Not the absence of fear or danger or uncertainty, but peace with all of it. Peace with the past he couldn't change and the future he couldn't control. Peace with the present moment that was all anyone ever really had. Winter came, and with it, Eliza's confirmation that she was pregnant. The news hit Ethan like a freight train. Joy and terror in equal measure, hope and fear tangled so tightly he couldn't separate them. "We're having a baby," Eliza said, wonder in her voice. "We're having a baby," Ethan repeated, testing the words. "Are you happy?" "I'm terrified, thrilled, completely overwhelmed." He pulled her into his arms. "Yeah, I'm happy. Happier than I have any right to be." The pregnancy wasn't easy. Eliza was sick for months, barely able to keep food down. Ethan learned to cook properly out of necessity, to clean and maintain the house while also handling the outdoor work. Catherine helped when she could, but mostly it was just them, two people navigating uncharted territory together. But through it all, hope grew along with Eliza's belly. Hope that maybe they could build something lasting. That maybe the frontier was done taking from them. That maybe, just maybe, happiness wasn't a temporary condition, but something they could actually keep. Spring returned, bringing new life to the land and new urgency to Eliza's condition. On a morning when the aspens were leafing out and the world smelled of possibility, her labor began. Catherine came immediately, bringing experience and calm competence. James took Ethan outside, recognizing that some things were women's work and men's presence just complicated matters. "She'll be fine," James said as Ethan paced the yard. "Catherine's delivered dozens of babies, including her own. What if she's not? What if something goes wrong? Then we deal with it, but assuming the worst doesn't prevent it, it just robs you of peace in the present." Ethan knew James was right, but knowing and feeling were different countries, and fear had a passport to both. The labor lasted 14 hours. 14 hours of Ethan wearing a path in the dirt, of Catherine's calm voice filtering through the windows, of Eliza's cries that made him want to burst through the door and fix everything even though there was nothing to fix except biology taking its course. Then, as the sun was setting on what felt like the longest day of Ethan's life, he heard it, a baby's cry. Angry and strong and absolutely perfect. Catherine appeared in the doorway, smiling. "You have a daughter. A healthy, loud, absolutely beautiful daughter, and Eliza's fine, tired, but fine." Ethan didn't remember moving, but suddenly he was inside, beside the bed where Eliza lay exhausted and radiant, holding a tiny bundle that contained his entire future. "Meet your daughter," Eliza said, her voice hoarse but happy. Ethan looked down at the small face, red and wrinkled and more beautiful than anything he'd ever seen. She had dark hair like Eliza, but her eyes, when they flickered open for a moment, were pale like his. She's perfect, he whispered. She is. What should we name her? They'd discussed names for months but never settled on anything. Now, looking at this miracle of a child, Ethan knew exactly what felt right. Hope, he said. Her name is Hope. Eliza's eyes filled with tears. Hope, Cade? It's perfect. She is hope. Proof that life keeps going, that beauty can come from pain, that the future's worth building even when the past tried to destroy you. He carefully took his daughter in his arms, marveling at how something so small could weigh so much. Not in pounds, but in responsibility, in possibility, in pure, condensed future. I won't fail you, he whispered to the baby. I can't promise perfect, can't promise easy, but I promise to show up every day, to protect you as best I can, to teach you to be brave and kind and honest, to love you with everything I have. Hope made a small sound, not quite a cry, not quite a coo, just a noise that said she was there, she was real, she was his. And Ethan Cade, who'd been dead inside for 8 years, who'd driven stages looking for an honorable death, who'd believed he'd lost his chance at happiness, felt his heart crack fully open with love so fierce it was almost painful. Years passed. Hope grew into a toddler, then a child, curious and brave and full of the kind of fearless joy that came from being loved without condition. A son followed 2 years later, Samuel, named after Eliza's father, dark-haired and serious even as a baby. The ranch grew too. Ethan's reputation for gentle horse-breaking spread, and soon he had more work than he could handle. They hired help, expanded the barn, added rooms to the cabin as the family grew. Catherine's girls became inseparable from their younger cousins, creating a tribe of children who ran wild across the property in the way frontier children did, learning to ride and shoot and survive with casual competence. Colorado Springs transformed around them. The railroad arrived, bringing goods and people an unprecedented growth. Streets were paved, buildings went up. The town that had been rough and ready became something approaching civilized. But out on Ethan and Eliza's land, life maintained a slower rhythm. Seasons turned. Horses were born and broken and sold. Gardens were planted and harvested. Children grew taller and smarter and more themselves with each passing year. On a summer evening when Hope was 7 and Samuel 5, Ethan sat on the porch watching his family. Eliza was teaching Hope to braid her hair while Samuel climbed trees with the kind of confidence that gave his father heart attacks. Catherine's family was visiting, the yard full of laughter and the chaos that came from too many children in one place. You look content, Eliza observed, settling beside him after successfully taming Hope's wild curls. I am, more than I ever thought possible. No regrets? About what? Giving up driving, settling down, choosing this life instead of the one you had. Ethan considered the question seriously. There were moments, brief, usually late at night, when he missed the simplicity of the road, the clarity of having one job, one purpose, one direction. But those moments were fleeting, gone as quickly as they appeared. No regrets, he said firmly. That life was about survival. This life is about living. There's no comparison. Even with all the hard parts, the fear, the work, the constant worry about the children, especially with those parts, they mean I'm invested, that I care, that I'm alive in ways I'd forgotten were possible. He pulled her close. You saved me, you know. Back on that stagecoach, you saw a dead man walking and decided he was worth bringing back to life. We saved each other. I was just as dead in my own way, just as lost. Then we found each other and built this. He gestured at the yard, at the children, at the land they'd transformed through years of effort. Not bad for 2 broken people. Not bad at all. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play in the golden evening light. Hope was organizing some elaborate game that involved everyone following her rules. Samuel was content to be ordered around, happy just to be included. Charlotte and Emma were playing along with the kind of patience that came from being the older cousins. This was peace, not the absence of conflict or challenge or fear, but the presence of love and purpose and connection strong enough to weather whatever came. What do you think happens next? Eliza asked. More of this, I hope. More years. More memories. More of watching them grow. Ethan paused. Eventually they'll leave, build their own lives, and it'll break my heart and make me proud in equal measure. And then what? Then it'll just be us again. Two old people on a porch remembering everything we survived and built and loved. That sounds perfect. It does, doesn't it? Hope ran up to the porch, breathless and excited. Papa, come play. We need someone to be the bandit. Ethan laughed. Again? I'm always the bandit. Because you're good at it. You look mean, but you're actually nice. That's what makes it fun. Is that how you see me? Mean looking, but nice? The best kind of person. Hope grabbed his hand. Come on, everyone's waiting. Ethan let himself be pulled into the game, playing the role of bandit with exaggerated menace that made the children shriek with delighted fear. He chased them around the yard, caught them, let them escape, got defeated by their elaborate plans. And watching from the porch, Eliza smiled, because this was the man who'd walked out to face real bandits with nothing but courage and a rifle. The man who'd protected her, loved her, built a life with her from nothing but determination and hope. That man was now on his hands and knees, pretending to be tied up by 5 children using jump ropes, roaring with fake anger while they giggled. He was alive. Fully, completely, joyfully alive. And that was the greatest victory the frontier had ever granted. As the sun set and the children were called in for dinner, as Catherine's family loaded up for the ride home, as the normal chaos of evening settled over the property, Ethan caught Eliza's eye across the yard. She smiled. He smiled back. No words needed, just the understanding between two people who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to walk toward light together. That night, after the children were asleep and the house had settled into quiet, Ethan and Eliza sat on their porch under a sky so full of stars it looked like someone had spilled diamonds. I love you, Ethan said. Simple words, but they carried weight earned through years of choosing each other, day after day, through hard times and good. I love you too. Have from the moment you faced down those bandits to protect people you barely knew. I was just doing my job. You were choosing life over death, even before you knew that's what you were doing. Eliza rested her head on his shoulder. You know what I think? What? I think we're going to grow very old together. I think we're going to see our children have children. I think we're going to build something that lasts long after we're gone. That's a lot of thinking. I'm an optimist. You married an optimist. Best decision I ever made. Second best, Eliza corrected. First best was choosing to live again. Marrying me was just a happy consequence. Ethan laughed, the sound carrying across the quiet land. You're right, as usual. Say that again. I want to remember this moment. You're right. One more time. You're right, and I love you, and I'm grateful for every day we have together. That's more than 3 words, but I'll allow it. They sat there as the night deepened, as the stars wheeled overhead in their eternal patterns, as the land they'd built their life on breathed and settled around them. Ethan Cade had spent 8 years as a ghost, driving stages through hostile country, looking for an end that never came. Then a woman with auburn hair and fearless eyes had climbed into his coach and changed everything. She'd forced him to feel when he wanted numbness, to hope when despair was easier, to live when dying had become comfortable. She'd saved him. Not by fixing him, he'd had to do that himself, but by showing him that fixing was possible, that the broken pieces of a man could be reassembled into something whole, something good, something worth keeping. And in return, he'd saved her from a half-life of her own. They'd saved each other, really. 2 broken people becoming whole through the simple act of choosing each other every single day. The frontier was still dangerous. Life was still uncertain. Tomorrow could bring disaster or joy in equal measure, and there was no way to predict which. But Ethan wasn't afraid anymore. Not of the future, not of loss, not of the vulnerability that came from loving deeply. He'd learned the greatest lesson the frontier had to teach. The courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the choice to build and love and hope despite it. And he'd learned it from a woman who'd looked at a man already lost and decided he was worth finding. As they headed inside, Eliza paused at the door and looked back at the land they'd built their life on. No regrets? She asked one more time. Ethan looked at the house full of children, at the wife who'd given him back his life, at the future spreading out before them full of possibility. Not a single one, he said. Not one. And it was true. Every word of it. The ghost had become a man. The survivor had become a liver. The broken had become whole. And in the end, that was everything.